How do I share the space?
You got
In
you click on share.
copy link, right? Yeah. I see that. Yeah. Click on share, copy link. Okay. Hop in, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Hop in. We're discussing the Twitter files. Why am I acting like I'm still on camera? Okay, yeah, it's out. Okay, so to give a brief overview of what's been going on, so today's Twitter files just dropped, and they dropped all at once, and it's a lot to go through. But essentially, it gives an overview of how Twitter worked together with the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security to censor a number of Twitter users. They were taking direct orders, essentially, from these government agencies, and they did so without informing the public as well. So there was no transparency, and people got suspended over jokes. What was essentially jokes. The FBI would send Twitter a bunch of requests and say, "Hey, take these down," and Twitter would review these requests. And in most cases, would act on it, and in most cases, they were just jokes published, typically by conservatives. And the only people who didn't get banned that we know of, that we can see, are liberals. So it's very one-sided, you know, because hey, they agreed with banning conservatives. Very cool. So, but one thing to note is that the FBI's requests also included liberals who were telling jokes. The Twitter just decided to act on only just half of them, if that makes sense. So that's where
Billy
we are so
Baldwin
far.
was spared, right?
Yep, that's right.
Billy Baldwin was spared. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
we
Billy
saw
Baldwin's not there.
we saw as well that um, there was a portal that was interesting. There was a portal between Twitter and the FBI for the FBI to send those requests. But those requests were very petty. Can you give us a few examples, Ian, just to while we wait for
Oh
everyone
no,
else to join?
one of the most common examples, and this was something that would pop up again and again, was something, as innocuous as, "Hey, don't vote on November 8th, vote on November 9th, or vote on November 10th." And like that would be it. Like they would say something like, "Hey, Democrats, go vote on November 9th. Conservatives, you guys vote today." Like it's a stupid joke. It's a fucking joke. Nobody believes it, right? But that was the quality of content that they were removing for election misinformation, even though it's clearly a joke. Doesn't matter who says it, doesn't matter if it's a liberal who says it or a conservative who says it. Nobody takes it seriously, right? It's obviously a joke. That was the stuff that they were removing. Now I understand if they want to remove something that was like clear disinformation, like, "Hey, this polling booth is closed, the machines don't work," like that. Obviously, yeah, you have to flag that, because that would be misinformation that's dangerous to the security of polls, right? But that was not the case in a lot of these cases. They haven't shown any examples of stuff like that. They've only shown examples of people saying dumb stuff like vote tomorrow, or vote next week, don't vote today. Like that's clearly a joke. But this was the quality of the stuff that was being flagged.
Did you get
And
to the?
it
I'm just
go
wanted
ahead,
to ask
Prodigal.
if you got to the tweet where the FBI is specifically requesting follower lists for flagged accounts and location info. I mean, that's insane.
I've not gotten there yet.
Shit.
That sounds juicy. That sounds pretty juicy. We're on what, number 35 or something like that so far?
Oh, you
Yeah,
I
passed
think
it.
so. And before, go ahead, Prodigal.
Yeah, you passed it. The tweet that was connected to that was Twitter drop number 18. It's in the email. The FBI's field
Oh.
office in the email is asking for it. And
Mm-hmm.
they phrase it, give us just what you want, but this is a federal agency that can, basically destroy them, saying, give us location
Yep.
info, give us all the followers of these accounts. They don't just want the accounts, they want the people following the accounts.
That's
Where
insane.
do you where do you see that, Prodigal?
It's an email. It's an
It's
email on number
18.
18.
I'll pin it up there. That's the only thing I'll pin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, appreciate
Remix
it.
that.
I'm gonna check it now.
Yeah,
So
remix
if
that
we go
one.
to 18, I'm gonna check it now. So 18, I'm gonna check it. So, um, okay, so they requested specifically NECP is requesting the following. What's the NECP?
That is a
National.
national election something something. It's a government agency.
Committee or National Election Committee, PPPP.
But the
All right,
FBI
so number
runs
one.
it. Yeah.
Okay, as part of the FBI. Okay, so number one, coordination between SF, which stands for San Francisco. No.
Yeah, yeah,
What's
that's
SF
San
goes?
Francisco.
Oh,
Yeah, that's San
okay.
Francisco.
Coordination between San Francisco and Twitter to determine whether the accounts identified below have violated Twitter's terms of service and may be subject any action deemed appropriate by Twitter. Number two, the issuance of preservation letters regarding the accounts identified below in order to preserve subscriber information and content information pending the issuance of legal process. And number three, any location information associated with the accounts that Twitter will voluntarily provide to aid the FBI in assigning any follow-up deemed necessary to the appropriate FBI field office. And there's a whole bunch of accounts. Everyone, if you go to tweet in the thread by Matt Taibbi, will put it, if it's pinned above by Protocol. Number 18, you can go through a list of Twitter accounts. So they're essentially, and that's it's a request from Twitter. So Twitter has to offer that information. Is that correct?
They don't, but it's the if you look at the relationship that Twitter and the FBI had, the way they were interacting, everything else, you're not going to mess with a government agency that can make your life miserable. I mean, some of the names on these lists are joke accounts. You have actor Billy Baldwin. These are not
Did you?
public safety
How many
threats.
have you gone through all of them or not yet? Have you gone through all of them, Protocol, or no?
I've read all of them. This, by far, to me, other than the weekly meeting email that's going to come up eventually, this by far was the most damning email I've seen.
And can you explain to the audience why do you find it damning?
I find it damning because you have a government agency basically limiting the user content, not on any public safety data. These are just people posting opinions, posting news articles, nothing about it posed any danger or threat. This is basically Matt Taibbi was on, I think it's called Rising Points the other day, and he's basically said, and I agree with, was that all the tools that the National Defense and Intelligence Agency developed on the war on terror to control and deal with information abroad has now been turned on to U.S. citizens, but not for public safety, for censorship and to push a narrative. If you look at most of these times when they had requests, they didn't even provide specific tweets. They just said, hey, look, We think they might be violating your terms of service. Do whatever you want to do. And then you look at them going through the accounts trying to find anything. I mean, they phrased it specifically for legal jargon. If anybody's an attorney, they're trying to cover their ass, but you can see how in-depth and incestuous this relationship was. And another drop, and I'll stop talking since you guys got to go through them, that crossed my attention, is that it's clear in these releases that they were also doing this operation in Facebook. We sort of knew this through Zuckerberg's interview with Joe Rogan, but specifically, I guess they flagged something of concern on Facebook and reached out to Twitter, and Twitter confirmed that no, this operation or whatever you're afraid of is not going on Twitter. So it's clear that this type of government intervention and involvement wasn't limited to Twitter, which we all knew, but we have confirmation that the FBI was doing this, at least with Facebook.
Where's the confirmation? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
I have to look through it. It was in another email attachment between the FBI and Twitter. I'll look for
In
it.
today's.
Can I
Hey,
really
Tara.
quickly interrupt? Hi, guys. I just want to remind people here, because so many people are still DMing me and asking me for the space. Please, please, please retweet the space. Spaces have been broken for the past 12 hours, so people are not seeing it at the top. So it does a huge service for everyone on Twitter if you just go and quickly retweet the space from any one of us, or just hit the share icon and tweet it out yourself. It's super helpful to let other people know we're here. Thank you, Mario.
How are you, Tara? How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited, and I'm so happy that Elon, heard what I said, that Twitter files would not be the same without Spaces, and sure enough, here we are. So it's just a perfect example of how he listens to us, and it's just amazing. I mean, I couldn't be happier right now, but I'm also, this is crazy. The FBI involvement and everything that we've all been talking about, it's all true. Like we've all been made out to be like these crazy people and gaslit so hard that I am like pinching myself. Like, am I actually awake right now? Is this the truth? Is this actually coming out? So it's wild.
Mario, I pinned it up for you. It was number 24. If you look at the email chain, it's basically Twitter responding to DHS or FBI requests. Towards the bottom of it, they say specifically that essentially the FBI had been in contact with Facebook regarding some things they wanted to flag, and they reached out specifically on Twitter to see if the same was going on. Twitter sent them a reply that it was not, but it was in that email that you would see that.
Which confirms that kind of the obvious. Go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, no, I have to say that as much as, yes, Twitter is an private company, but when the FBI comes with a request, and it is so vague, right? They're not saying we have these very specific criminal charges that we're investigating, and therefore we need your assistance. And I worked at one point in sort of the law enforcement side of things, and that makes sense. Sometimes you do ask social media companies to cooperate, where you set up dummy accounts and things like that. But in this case, they are being incredibly vague, and they're targeting sort of such a wide assortment of accounts that didn't seem to violate the law. And that's the key here. They haven't violated, like Billy Baldwin being an account that I would recognize. I mean, there's no legal violations. So for the FBI to sort of come, it feels a little McCarthy to me. Mm-hmm. And so the threat that a company like Twitter, independent of their politics, would feel when a major kind of organization like that would come to them, I do feel that crosses a line. And again, I don't think it's about politics at all. I've been thinking about this a lot, and it doesn't matter whether it's like I don't know if it's conservatives only that have been targeted or not. I don't think that's so clear to me in what the Twitter files have shown.
I think we've seen in today's drop that no, liberals were targeted, just not to the same extent.
Yeah, and I think that's good that that's come out. And so I think where the line is crossed is really that there was targeting in general, and that the FBI specifically, or any government agency, was involved. So I think.
But Catherine, if you've worked for law enforcement, you know how they can couch their language to provide cover. When you look at this, over 90% is targeting conservative Twitter, right? Just to cover your ass, you throw in a few other accounts, and just to show how bad faith the FBI was, when they sent these accounts and said, "Hey, look, they violated your service." In some instances, Twitter said there was no violation. So this just showed the FBI's intent to control the narrative, control free speech when it came to election integrity and security issues. Because in that email 18, there is a reply later on. And in some of the accounts, they said, listen, this was worth a lockout, this was worth a permanent ban, but for these, we saw no violation. So that just shows the FBI, even to be forwarding this without providing any specific tweets, any information, shows that this was just done to chill free speech.
So I kind of differ on this opinion that you guys are saying that the FBI was intimidating Twitter, and I don't think that's the case. Major corporations, multi-billion-dollar corporations, they don't easily get intimidated from the FBI when they're issuing statements regarding election interference.
So this is an effective use of the FBI's resources. Is that what you're saying? Instead of tracking down fentanyl dealers, dealing with federal crimes, you think that they should be using this amount of resources to censor free speech?
No, I think what Protocol. I think what Protocol. That's not what he was saying,
No.
Protocol. I think he did. Yeah, I think what he was saying is that
I was giving him another argument that even if it was what he said,
so
let
can
him
I
explain
But
why
just let him
FBI
finish.
should-
Let Brian finish.
Go ahead, Brian. You're muted, bro. Brian, you're muted.
Sorry, I got it. Yeah, so like I was saying, I don't think they're easily intimidated, especially a $40 billion company like Twitter. I personally had my business contacted by the FBI. I ran internet forums, and they asked me for IP addresses of specific individuals. I didn't feel intimidated at all. I didn't feel like I had to give them that information. It was a request. It wasn't a subpoena. If I turned down that, maybe they would have subpoenaed me. I don't know. But I didn't have the money to fight off a subpoena or anything. These corporations,
But wouldn't it be
have
easier to cooperate than not to cooperate?
Oh, absolutely. But when you have a legal team on your staff, and you can quickly and easily fight back if you wanted to. These FBI requests are related to specific incidences, election information that's being passed on, maybe misinformation, maybe not. And Twitter can decide for themselves. It's a request. It's not.
Well, my problem with them is that they're general. They're not specifying instances, right? So they're just giving account names, and they want just general information. They're not saying these are the instances.
I agree. I think that some of the requests are ridiculous, but I don't think that Twitter is feeling like they're forced.
Yes. I would agree, Catherine, because like if their requests are mainly targeting people on the right, as we've seen, and Twitter is more left-leaning, then it would make sense. And Brian, I don't think that's what you're implying, but I'm gonna go there. I think Twitter would then. Why wouldn't they comply? Because like they already have that bias, and we saw that in previous file drops. Steve, you were unmuting.
They have that relationship, it's a working relationship with the FBI.
Plus, you can
Mario,
bank
actually,
that.
I was actually going to say,
favor,
Mario,
right?
that you could.
Sorry, just muted everyone. Steve, I know you were the first to unmute, and I think Sphinx was speaking right after you. So, Steve, I'll let you just quickly comment, and then we go to Sphinx.
Appreciate it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what Brian was saying, and a point I would largely agree with him on, is Twitter didn't have to have their arm twisted to cooperate with the FBI. We already know through what we've seen through the Twitter files thus far is that there was an overwhelmingly inherent bias to the left. It is also seeming that the FBI has shared a common goal with Twitter 1.0 and being biased against folks that weren't more to the left. So the cooperation there seemed very symbiotic and almost voluntary overall. So I think is that generally what you're saying, Brian?
Yeah, I agree with the point that Twitter was already biased towards the left. There's no doubt that their employees were biased towards the left. I don't know if I agree that the FBI is biased towards the left. I think that overall, I think the majority of FBI agents are more right-leaning if you were to do research on that. So I don't know if I'd agree with that.
Well, I would counter that, maybe not necessarily in that regard, but I think there's enough evidence to show that the FBI had a lot of efforts to thwart and stifle the Trump administration specifically. I know Seb Gorka has spoken to that as well. The last thing I'll say is a lot of the overreach of power that we had been seeing from the FBI in relation to Twitter 1.0 would not have been legally possible without the Patriot Act. Again, we are still feeling the consequences from this awful piece of legislation from 2001. We need to completely repeal it. We need to elect public officials who are willing to do it, willing to stand up to do it. This is absolute bullshit. It's nonsense. The Patriot Act has no place in American life, in my opinion.
I want to quickly, I know Sphinx, I want to give you the mic right after Sphinx, so I didn't forget, but quickly, we just had Name Redacted join. Not sure, Ian, do you know Name Redacted, the account?
I'm not super familiar.
So he did a
with it, but I've
tweet,
seen it
yeah,
before.
so he did a tweet about 10 days ago, talking about Twitter and all the ex-FBI and CIA agents working there in high ranks, and it went pretty viral. It got 21,000 likes, 9,000 retweets. So first, Name Redacted, thanks for joining, man.
Thank you. I think in light of today's Twitter files dump, it's even more important. The one thing, you know, if anyone listening has not seen it, go to my account. It's pinned. There are still 15 former FBI agents working at Twitter. This should be talked about even more than anything right now.
So you're saying right now?
Yes.
Sorry, Tara.
That it's okay, really quick. I was just going to say that Brian made a point of saying that, you know, most FBI agents, or he would say the majority, are more to the right, but that doesn't prove that the ones who are actually working tight knit with Twitter are not more left leaning, if that makes sense.
Well,
yeah,
Elon did say he likes the
but-
FBI overall, so he did tweet that.
Well,
I mean,
why are
Tara,
they-
to
So
add
going-
to that,
going-
it's
going-
clear
oh,
that
guys,
the
before-
people in command, the people
I
in
wanna-
command who were issuing
I want to
these
go
orders.
back. I want to go back to
These
Name
are former
Redacted.
FBI agents that are in high-ranking positions at Twitter, senior management roles. So
And there's 15 of them at
yeah,
the
they're
moment.
all- I listed all
After
of them on my thread. All of their LinkedIn's were public. They didn't hide it. You know, some of them have scrubbed it since then, but at the time, they're all public. So it's not
Wow.
like a secret.
So,
It's a
but then
pinned
I want
thread
to
on my
take
account.
but how many? So I have another question. How many were let go since Elon took over? Do you know?
I think just Jim Baker. All their profiles at the time when I wrote the thread, they're all current employees. And if you want to, I
But-
mean, I didn't go into
But
like their
didn't
political-
Elon? Hold on. Didn't Elon let go of a big percentage of the employee or the staff at Twitter? There must be
Yes,
more
but-
FBI agents among those, no?
There could be. I mean, the 15 that I highlighted are still currently there. There were probably 3 other profiles that were hidden, like they're not available. So there's probably like 18, and that's just of the ones that have a LinkedIn profile.
Why do you think there's such a high number of FBI or former CIA people working at a company like this? Is there strategic relevance, do you think, or is there? Yeah.
Hey, Catherine,
Absolutely,
we do
and
have
I'll
a new.
tell you, hold on.
Sorry.
I looked at Facebook and I looked at Google, and I'm going to write something about Facebook this weekend, and it's going to blow your mind. It's even worse at Facebook. And by the way, all these FBI, CIA, now Twitter just has FBI agents. Facebook has enough dozens of CIA, NSA, and FBI, and every single person was hired after Trump was elected. Maybe that's just a coincidence. I don't know. And a lot of these people are in the trust and safety groups at these companies.
So you're saying
Well, I think
Meta
Mark
has more.
Zuckerberg.
So
I know.
just before we move on, just sorry guys. Tom, welcome to stage. Tom, a couple of quick questions. Sorry, Name Redacted. You're saying Meta has even more ex
Meta
FBI and
has over 60.
Yes,
60
and
or
Mark
70.
Zuckerberg came out and said that he was being strong-armed by the FBI. He did that on a Joe Rogan interview. Did you ever get a chance to watch that, Mario?
no. Interesting.
Yeah, Mark
Well, they-
Zuckerberg came out and basically whistleblowed on the FBI, and this was months ago, in regard to
we-
censorship.
One thing that's kind of interesting is, for example, with Meta, we know that there's some involvement, for example, with everything that's going on in Iran, removing some of the evidence of the crimes that are being committed against the people protesting the revolution there, or the protest there. There's pressure on these companies to remove that, and they've actually cooperated. So, I mean, I wonder what involvement there is in those kinds of actions.
So before we go to, so I see Sphinx and Protocol
Mario, can I
and
make one more point?
yeah, I want to go back to you. I have one more question to you, and then we'll go to Visuant.
Okay.
Good to have you. So what the question I have for you, man? You said there's over 60 at Meta. Are you gonna release the entire list as well? You've got a list or not yet?
Yeah, I do. I'll
Oh,
put it
you're a
out.
beast.
I'll put it out
I'm
like
gonna,
Monday.
yeah, my team is gonna send you my number, man. Let's connect off of Twitter, like DM me personally.
One more point I want to make too is the first Twitter files dump. I forget who did it, Matt Taibbi, I think. And then that was obviously interfered with by Jim Baker. So that tells you how much access he had. So how much there are still ex-FBI agents working at Twitter in management roles. What access do they have? What are they doing? What were they acting as intermediaries with Yoel Roth and this whole thing? You know, like that needs to be explored, and hopefully Elon's doing it.
Can I read this last tweet by Matt Taibbi just a moment ago? It says, instead of chasing child sex predators or terrorists, the FBI has agents, lots of them, analyzing and mass flagging social media posts, not as part of any criminal investigation, but as permanent and in itself surveillance operation. People should not be okay with this.
Sphinx.
Yeah, thank you, Mario. I just wanted to say, and it kind of relates to what Tara just read. You know, the FBI, I agree with you, Brian, was not pressuring Twitter. Twitter was an active participant here. They were partners. This is not take any sort of culpability off of Twitter here. And another thing I wanted to say is, you know, I was in the space last night with the journalists, and when Elon came in, and Mario, you'd be very disappointed. It was not like your spaces when he comes in. They were rude. They were just a bunch of brats, and they were very rude to him. And then they were surprised that he left. Okay, so what I wanted to say about that is, you know, they're making this new narrative now that, oh, now it's okay for, you know, he has a problem with certain people getting banned, but he bans journalists. No, that's not the problem. The problem is what he has a problem with is basically Twitter was acting as an extension of the U.S. government. We're seeing that now again, as an extension of the U.S. government via the FBI. But you expose his real-time whereabouts, that's against him. He's not doing that against a Democrat or a Republican. If it was Sean Hannity, he would have done the same thing. He would have suspended him. So this narrative that he's a hypocrite is completely false.
So I want to first about the space you're referring to. Yeah, it was pretty, like, you can disagree with him. I don't mind at all. I'd love to disagree with Elon. Just the founder, the CEO of the company is just jumping into your space, giving you his personal time. How many times did Jack Dorsey come in and talk about a glitch on fucking Spaces? It's insane. I was just listening to the All In podcast, and they're saying, like, how does he, like, to be honest, Elon should not be doing this. I know we all love him doing it, but like, he's trying to take humans to Mars. He's trying to fly rockets to space.
No, I think it's
I don't want him
it's
to.
it's healthy for the platform to show that
It is, but he only has 24 hours in a day. Like, he's healthy for the platform, but like
he's
the
time manager. He's got a good time manager. I wouldn't be concerned about it. If anything,
I don't know.
it
He
shows
tweets
that
a lot.
It's not even that, Mario. As someone who's hosted spaces that he's gone to, he came into a hostile space, which already tells you should be gracious, let the guy speak.
Exactly.
Then they start attacking him, and then Brian Seltzer claims that the guy who was attacking him in the couple minutes he was there was the first person to interview him, which is BS because you've had him on several times. So
Yes.
it just was BS. The whole
No,
thing
it's
was
fine. Like, but what's also worse is that so again, this is a space criticizing Elon, and he comes in instead of being an echo chamber and going only to spaces that like him, he came in to speak to them. So the way they treated him is just it's just silly. It's just stupid. It just doesn't make sense. And then just to add a cherry on top of the cake, they're breaching the terms of service by joining the space with an account that was suspended. So, so it's like shit over shit over shit. But to go back to the, I know that Protocol and Visuant, you want to speak. Tom, I'll go to you as well. I didn't see your hand up. If you have anything to say, you can jump in at any time as always. But Visuant, I'll give you the mic briefly. What do you think on what was mentioned so far before we go to Tom and get his thoughts on the drop so far?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much. I think it's probably already been said already, but I just wanted to reiterate one more time that, it's with all the presence of like the FBI and CIA and everything within Twitter, the main thing that really, the red flag that pops up in my head is that I think they're trying to be a people manager. I think they're trying to influence and make sure that only certain groups see certain things, and they're trying to like really manipulate the platform itself. And I'm definitely very concerned about that, and I'm glad that we're all talking about it and getting it out in the open, but that's definitely a concern.
By the way, respect you. I brought you up because I saw you work with or for Andrew
Yes.
Yang. So it was great to get you on board to get different perspectives on this and to balance out the panel. And it's just good to see a bipartisan support for the topic we're discussing. And just to kind of refresh it for the audience before we continue, we go to Tom. To refresh it for the audience, so far the drops, we haven't finished them yet. Ian's going to continue going through them. But from what I understood, and Ian, correct if I get anything wrong, or if you want to add on to it, from what I understood is that the FBI is sending requests, and they're pretty silly, petty requests for Twitter to take action on different tweets. A lot of them are jokes. There's tweets by people from the right and the left, but however, it is leaning more towards the right, both from the FBI and where Twitter is taking action. And we saw as well in one of the emails that Protocol mentioned is that this is they're doing the same thing at Meta, because Meta is mentioned at the bottom of one of the emails that's pinned above. And lastly, there was a portal between both platforms that they were using. We'll see what more things the thread will mention, but that's what I got out of it, Ian. Before we go to Tom, Ian, anything else to add about the thread?
No, that's correct. You summed it up
Cool.
pretty well.
Oh, glad. Tom, what are your thoughts so far?
Good evening, everyone. I'm seeing more evidence of criminal activity by government officials, potentially private sector individuals over at Twitter. The Privacy Act, for instance, protects you from being investigated in this way by the FBI, for them to be going through even social media postings without any good faith basis, just because they don't like the tone of your speech or the fact that you may be getting things wrong or making jokes about elections. It's not a basis for the FBI to take action against you. What's interesting here in the FBI list was this Right Side Broadcasting Network also targeted for material for potential censorship for Twitter. And it's this kind of casual approach to censorship in league with the FBI that's really quite remarkable. Some will downplay this by suggesting, well, this is something we already knew. No, we didn't know this. We didn't know that the FBI regularly sent individual names over to Twitter for them to then censor. And we have confirmation this has taken place. Now, the question is, who's going to investigate this? Is the FBI going to investigate the FBI? I don't know. But if I were Elon Musk, I'd release everything. And I'd release communications with Facebook and Google showing the censorship, collusion with the FBI and DHS and this quasi front for the FBI, this civic integrity organization, a name I don't have in front of me. So maybe someone can pull up that front group that was being used as a tool of the government also to try to get individuals censored. And this has been going on till recently. And I'd be very interested to hear what's still happening. Do they still have access to this portal for COVID and election issues, obviously through November, and what was being done even after Musk took over as a result of these interagency, or I should say, government-public partnerships for censorship, and also. In response to the whole conflagration over the media doxing of Musk, if I were him, I would focus on media requests for censorship as well. And we all know about the censorship beat reporters that make a living asking big tech companies, isn't this person terrible? Why do you still have them on your platform? And trying to get them to censor. And it'd be, I think, very illustrative and enlightening to highlight the media efforts to get Americans censored as they're complaining about getting censored for targeting Musk with the dangerous doxing.
I
That's it
do
for
want to
now.
add, Tom, just quickly. I know other speakers want to jump in, but we do have an ex-CIA operations officer that is open to joining. So I'm going to send him through an invite. It'd be good to have him come in. Catherine.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Tom because I think we focus a lot on Twitter, which is indeed a private company, which has bias, which is not great. And I think it's very problematic. So do other companies. So do university campuses. Lots of, lots of companies and private institutions do. But I think the much bigger story to me is that government agencies are involved, and specifically the FBI. And so I think, to me, that is the much bigger focus. And if it can happen, in the case of, like, let's say conservatives, it's good. And we've seen that it happens with, left-leaning as well. So I think, to me, that is the much greater focus. So even if Twitter cooperated and did this willingly, that's fine. I mean, it's not fine, but that just speaks to their bias, and that's something that can happen. But it doesn't take care of the bigger problem that I think has to be sort of, taken care of is a much broader, bigger issue that's really a legal issue to me, and something that has to be dealt with through legislation and through legal means. And that's something that, to me, is really the really big issue. And it is something that I think most people wouldn't have been aware of, including myself, until the Twitter files. And that is really the big shocking thing, is that these communications between the FBI and Twitter and other social media companies were happening with these private sort of accounts.
So we do have. So just
Mario, is
quickly
there any
before
way
you
I
go,
could just
Prodigal.
touch on one thing?
Yeah, I'll let you do so. Just before you do, first I want to welcome Alexis to the stage. But Feds for Medical Freedom, I'd love you to speak in a bit. If you can just DM me and I'll have the team message you. Just send us some anything to verify your previous position at I think it was the FBI, will be greatly appreciated. No, at the CIA, sorry, would be greatly appreciated, and I'd love to give you the mic in a bit as well. But Prodigal, you were jumping in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we can look at this in the vacuum. I mean, we're looking at this just in regards to Twitter. People have to remember, at the same time, this administration was setting up a DHS, this info board, and was giving speeches painting people who wanted election integrity and security to issues to be resolved as potential domestic terrorists. Right. So, silencing these voices online and citations to credible news sources or direct evidence. At the same time, they're starting to build a federal apparatus to go against anybody who disagrees with their view is problematic. This isn't limited to big tech, right? They were working in conjunction with corporate media. And yeah, I think it is an issue when you have the FBI wasting this amount of resources, money, time, and manpower to go after Americans' free speech. A lot of people in the FBI have law degrees. They know how to couch this so that they can have the benefit of the doubt when it gets to court. It's clear that they just sent names of accounts and said, hey, this might be violating stuff. And you literally see Twitter saying we scour through it and looking for reasons to ban people without any actual basis for the FBI's request. And yes, I agree. Twitter willingly went along because ideologically they're aligned, but there's a problem when big tech monopolies and the government have this incestuous relationship, and you don't know where one starts and one ends. Right? They didn't have to twist Twitter's arm, right? But the reality of the matter is, any smart businessman too, if you don't like the person they're asking that you censor and remove their ability to speak, you just couched favors with the FBI. So if something comes down later, it's documented that you are helping the FBI, and you can call in that favor later. So this is a lot more intricate than a lot of people are trying to make it out as if, oh, no, this is clear violations ethically. And in my opinion, the FBI breaking the law and use extra legal means to violate Americans' constitutional rights. And I'll finish it fast. Like, when people said, yeah, maybe the rank and file, maybe a lot of them are conservative. I don't know. The vaccine mandate forced a lot of people out of the military and federal government who I believe probably were conservative and cared about specific values. But the reality matter
But
is
it's funny timing, protocol. As you mentioned this, we do have a gentleman. I don't know if I can mention your name, sir, but you worked at the CIA and you opposed the vaccine and you were pushed out for that reason. That's for you, Feds for Medical
Yeah.
Freedom.
Hi. I'm Vice President of Feds for Med Freedom, and yes, I did work with them. I no longer work there because I opposed vaccine mandates. I found other employment outside the agency. So hey, thanks for having me on. Thanks for letting Feds for Med Freedom speak here. And it's
Thanks for being here.
great platform for discussing these issues. I think when you're talking about what's coming out with the Twitter files, there's a lot of organizations that have been putting out FOIA requests, like Feds for Med Freedom, for quite some time. And probably, actually, Mr. Fitton, we'd love some help. We've been putting out FOIA requests. We're getting mixed results. We put out FOIA requests, I think, as early as September this year. We started putting things out asking about censorship of platforms. I think the big thing
And just for the audience, sorry. First, do you mind if I use your name, or you haven't
Sure,
disclosed your name?
sure, it's Jim.
Okay, so
Jim.
James, yeah, I've got your name. So James Erdman. So FOIA requests are essentially requests for information. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. So
But I do also want to ask you a question. As you finish your point, I want you to also tell us more about your thoughts on the influence that we were talked about earlier. How much influence do the FBI, from what you know, the FBI and the CIA have at Twitter or Meta, based on the numbers we shared earlier? 15 employees at the moment at executive positions at Twitter from the FBI and CIA, and Meta's at over 60.
I think in general, people look at federal government employees who move on to the private sector and say, well, what are they doing over there? Most of them, 99% of them, are looking for a new job. They're looking to get paid just like everybody else. They've decided
Your
that.
mic, sorry, James, your mic is rubbing on something. Just if you can.
Sure. I think.
That would be great.
Is this a little bit better?
Much better.
Okay. What I was saying was 99% of federal government employees, doesn't matter where they came from, if they're moving on to the private sector, they're moving on because they've decided that maybe they want to make more money, maybe they want a little additional freedom.
And do you think the companies hiring them, why do you think do you think they'll have influence still having worked at those companies? Is that a reason, or are we looking too deep into this and there isn't too much to look into?
No, I think you'd be naive to think that there isn't an interest in influence. But if you're talking about somebody who's working as a systems engineer over at Twitter because they've got some very technical related skill, they're probably brought on because they've dealt with big data questions, or they've been brought on because they've dealt with questions of how to parse data in a way that makes it useful to the user. If you're talking about executives or board of directors, well, that's different. What they're looking for is somebody who has reach. Many of these companies, and the social media companies, are probably a little bit different than, say, Amazon or Google. Amazon and Google have hardware. They've got, huge contracts that go out. If you're talking social media, you'll have to look at each individual that's been hired on an individual basis. Some of the things, and I don't want to have this too much of a shotgun blast because I've been listening for a while now, but they talked about the voluntary involvement of social media companies. That's really what it is. I can't speak to FBI. I don't know anything about exactly how that works there. But if a company, and as far as private entities working with the government, there's usually a financial benefit at some point, with a company. In the end, a company is a company. There's a bottom line that's involved. And so, if you're gonna work with somebody, you're thinking that at the end of the road, there's a pot of gold somewhere. If that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. And it would be good to have you stay with us on stage. I know there's a few speakers that want to speak, but guys, I want Ian to finish. Ian, do you mind finishing off the files? Because I know we haven't gone through all of them.
Yeah,
I
we
summarized what we've read so
really
far.
quick in the
Go ahead, Tara.
background, really quick. If you Feds for Medical Freedom, if you know anyone else who is a potential whistleblower or anyone else who is in the CIA, FBI who could join the space, that would be amazing. Sorry about that.
Nice one. Yeah, no, really good one, Fed. If you can, or James, if you could send them to me via DM and we'll verify them and invite them up, that would be great. It just the main question I have, and you kind of gave us some clarity about it already, is like what having someone from the FBI work at your company. You know, my previous co-host and who still works at the company, Chet, used to work for the Air Force at the intelligence and worked at the nuclear program at the US, and we have him in the team because he knows his shit. So there's nothing wrong with having people that used to work for the FBI, but having a lot of them at executive positions and then considering the story and the drop that we're seeing now, I think there's a lot of questions that we had that we'd love answered. So if there's anyone you can invite, just DM me on Twitter. I'll keep your DMs open. It would be great to have them come up on stage.
And also
Ian
having
could
them disproportionately right wing isn't necessarily a good thing either. Just want to
agree.
point that
Yeah,
out.
that's a good point. Yeah, exactly. So James, if we can have
Mario,
different.
if there's the one thing about the FBI, because in that email they essentially phrased it as if they're going to bring charges. They said these are preservation letters. We'll let you know later on. To my knowledge, the bulk of the people on that list that they wanted banned, none of them were ever charged. So they were, imagine you're at a company and they're basically telling the FBI is telling you that we believe these accounts are violating federal law. Preserve it. Give us the telephone information, etc. Like the pressure, even if it's a left-wing organization, you're not going to fight it, because if it comes out later that these people did commit crimes, you don't want to be beholden in the media as defending them. So the pressure is immense.
So what you're saying is that they're using that as an excuse to get them suspended or get the tweets deleted?
And to preserve the information, get their follower list, get their location. I mean, they asked for
okay, yeah. So yeah, there's another exactly. There's another important tweet. So I see Watcher Guru, who covers a lot of this information. So there's two important things if you wanna, as you do your tweets, Watcher Guru. Two important points. Number one is in the threads, and Protocol pinned both above earlier. In the threads, there's one email that mentions Meta, so it shows that a lot of this is, and we kind of make that assumption, but we didn't have any evidence to point that direction as far as I'm aware. So one email does mention Meta, and then another email mentions that the FBI was requesting
Election Integrity Project. That's the EIP at Stanford. That's a think tank, right? That's not a government agency, which was apparently the strength of information for the Center for Internet Security. CIS is a government organization, so they're working together with the EIP to flag video content. And here's the video. It says here, this is a long and legal heavy video, but essentially claims that the Pennsylvania election workers opened inner envelopes on ballots before election day and called people to correct their ballots on election day, according to the CIS, which is escalated through the EIP. The video misrepresents one, Pennsylvania law, two, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision, and three, affidavits shown in the video.
Information on those users, including
that's a think tank.
Information on those users, including location. Because yeah, I think we all know that requesting such information is relatively common. You'd be naive to think otherwise. But the reasons behind it is what made it at least potentially concerning for some of us. And I know some of you were also discussing the whole Elon story with the journalists, etc. So Alex, who's on the panel,
it doesn't help that the deputy
Protocol, you gotta give me a break, man. I'll give you the mic right after, I promise. Right after Ian reads the rest of the thread. But just for anyone listening, we're going to be covering that story tomorrow in a space. Alex and Catherine are helping get journalists from both sides of the aisle, and Brian as well, who's on stage, I think. Journalists from both sides of the aisle to cover. To discuss that story in free speech and where to draw the line, etc. Because I know that's been a really hot topic in the last 2 days. So that will be a discussion for tomorrow. I'll pin the tweet above, and it's on my profile as well. But Ian, I'll let you continue going through the thread. Otherwise, we'd never be able to do so.
I'm never going to get the opportunity to finish because
yeah, I know, but
I don't blame you.
It's fine, Ian. We'll just talk over you each time.
Yeah, I'll just mute you. It's fine. Number 35.
Oh, games are fun.
Yeah, 35 FBI in one case sent over so many possible violative content reports. Twitter personnel congratulated each other in Slack for the monumental undertaking of reviewing them. All right, Election Integrity Project, that's the EIP at Stanford. That's a think tank, right? That's not a government agency, which was apparently the strength of information for the Center for Internet Security. CIS is a government organization, so they're working together with the EIP to flag video content, and here's the video. It says here, this is a long and legal heavy video, but essentially claims that the Pennsylvania election workers opened inner envelopes on ballots before election day and called people to correct their ballots on election day, according to the CIS, which is escalated through the EIP. The video misrepresents 1, Pennsylvania law, 2, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision, and 3, affidavits shown in the video in the thread. The thoughts on how to handle this one, and it's a link to Tracy Beans, who is a QAnon poster, right? She's one of the, I would say, loudest proponents of QAnon. And basically, it flags the video that she posted. I don't know if she made it. No idea. Doesn't really specify. 42. If that's confusing, that's because CIS is a DHS contractor. It describes itself as partners of the Cyber and Internet Security Agency, CISA, at the Department of Homeland Security. So DHS essentially has a ton of these organizations that are working under it or partnering with it, and these are mostly contract workers, people who work with the government or for the government, right? They are people like Nina Jankovic, who was, as we all know, the censorship czar for the Disinformation Governance Board, which is now closed. So the EIP is one of a series of government-affiliated think tanks that mass review content. The list also includes Atlantic Council's a digital forensics research laboratory. A lot of people ask me, is the Atlantic Council in any of these emails? Well, yes, they are. They are in this thing, right? So it's one of the several organizations that have worked with the DHS on, information suppression, as I would call it, or in this case, information monitoring, right? That's how they would probably describe themselves. And others include the University of Washington's Center for Informed Policy. Britain also has a number of these, like the Center for, what is it called, Digital Hate, Centering Digital Hate. That's one of them. Another one is the one that that Nina Jankovic now works with. It's the Center for Internet Information or some bullshit. I don't know the name of it. So the takeaway, and this is 44, we're almost done here. What most people think of as the deep state is really a tangled collaboration of state agencies, private contractors, and sometimes state-funded NGOs, like the ones I just mentioned. They're all, many of them are state-funded. They take government contracts. They work with the government. Sometimes it's the U.S. government, sometimes it's the UK government, or Germany, or so on. Like one of the biggest Antifa accounts on this platform, which is still active to my knowledge, the one that doxed libs of TikTok, is funded by the German government, right? Their department of, I'm not sure exactly which department, but it funds them, right, to enables them to do their work on suppressing information. And the lines are so blurred as to become meaningless. That's what Matt Taibbi says. And number 45, final one, says Twitter Files researchers are moving into a variety of new areas now. So watch Barry Weiss and Schellenberger, that's Michael Schellenberger, and this space for more soon. So we're probably going to get more, well, not probably, we're definitely going to get more new drops. Some of them will be related to the COVID-19 disinformation. Some of them might actually branch out farther than that, where, there are files related to Brazil's election tampering stuff, for instance, that was very recent, as well as Canada's suppression of the Freedom Convoy protests. That is something that I personally requested. I think that's something that Elon Musk, if he's listening to the space, would do well to give to Rebel News, because we are the best, most capable organization of covering that, because we covered the Freedom Convoy protests from day one. Right, we are the only company, the only media news.
We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everyone knows it, especially the other side. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anybody hurt. It's a very tough period of time. There's never been a time like this where such a thing happened, where they could take it away from all of us. From me, from you, from our country. This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
Piotr, I was giving it to Tom because I know he had his hand
sorry.
up. Tom, you wanted to comment on the. Oh, good, mate. Oh, good. Tom, I saw you wanted to comment on the last bit of the drops. You're muted, Tom.
Yeah, it's important to note, as Ian noted, that you've got this cutout for the feds funded, the variety of left-wing funded mechanisms behind it, in addition to partnering with the government to censor Americans. And, you know, if I recall correctly, this group was behind a series of lists smearing Americans with, quote, putting out misinformation. I think I was number 3 or 4 on the list. And what was going on here is that the left was getting pushback from people like me and others concerned about the changes to the election systems in the run-up to 2020. And for those of you who don't know, Judicial Watch is a major group when it comes to election integrity. We're in federal court repeatedly on it. We have former lawyers from the Justice Department working on our team. We've testified to Congress. There's really few groups that have more national expertise in this area than others, and yet we start getting censored, and Judicial Watch and others start getting censored by partisans and ideologues who think that if you question the way elections are being run and the way the changes that were implemented will impact election integrity, you're to be censored. And in the case of the FBI, you couldn't even joke about showing up to quote vote on Wednesday, the day after election. So you've got a major issue going on here, and you know Musk was on these spaces a few days ago or last week, and he talked about this portal, and there's a reference to the teleporter process, which is kind of a new word for us, that the FBI and others had access to get people censored. So the big question I have at this stage is, has Twitter turned off the special access to the feds? And if we're thinking about how to deal with this, what is it we can do quickly? Well, maybe we can get Congress to stop the federal government from asking big tech companies to censor American citizens. You know, just straight
So
up.
I don't know about you, but I'm tired of the censorship. I'm tired of being told we're not allowed to talk about what the government's up to with respect to this public health debate. And I'm tired of big tech pretending that they're doing it to advance the public health when in fact they're just doing it to help the Biden administration at this point, who needs all the help they can get for the reasons that are, I would think, are rather obvious to you.
In terms of, quote, big tech reform?
I'm in total agreement with that. What I find kind of hilarious, I don't really care too much about the Twitter files anymore because it's a lot of confirming of what we already knew and what we suspected of Twitter doing. My big concern is what is Google and Facebook doing? And I haven't heard any politicians actually try to do anything about it other than firing off a few tweets or going on Fox News or something, because Congress should be having this conversation that we're having right now. What does this mean for our government? What does this mean for big tech? How is that relationship combined? And why aren't they doing anything to move things along? I have full faith that Elon will figure out all the corruption going on within Twitter and bring it to light. But none of it really matters if Congress doesn't act on the other big tech social media platforms.
That's because
Are
they
they
still
not?
need to control us. So they're not going to like come out and be open about any of this because this is how they control the masses. I mean, why would they
Is no one
reveal
in
their own
Congress
hand?
doing that, Tara? Like, is
If
no one
anything,
in Congress talking about it? Are there no politicians, left, right, where whoever? Is
no,
no one?
not that I
No?
know of.
Is it any Catherine? Are you implying there is some, Catherine? You can share with us.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I haven't followed
I think
specifically.
there is.
I've read that
Has
there
it?
Jim
have
Jordan,
been.
guys, Jim Jordan. He can
Yeah, I
call
was
them.
gonna.
He can take them to task.
Invite them.
Yeah, we should. We should.
Good point. I'll try to bring
Partially,
him, George. Jordan.
I think the lack of effort right now on their part is there's a few days left of their terms and they might not want to even open this bottle of worms until the new Congress comes in January. But I honestly don't think they're going to take any action because they really don't care. Their positions aren't threatened by the Twitter files.
Well, it's
I
even
don't think
worse
they
than
do it over the
it's even
Twitter
worse.
I don't think they do it over the Twitter files. And if anything, I feel in some ways the Twitter files makes it more politicized, like to one side. So like, I think it has to be a partisan effort. And I think the one issue that I have with the Twitter files, it does come across like it kind of comes across right wing and some more conservative to some extent. And
But if
so
those are the
it
facts,
makes it
who cares?
I agree
Well,
with you. I mean, I'm here because of the facts. I'm not here. I mean, I'm not a conservative, so I'm not here because of anything but the facts, and I'm supporting it because of the facts. But most politicians care about perception, right? I mean, they're politicians for a reason, right?
fine line.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, the pun writes itself. So you have to care about optics, and so optics play a huge role. So you have to look at these things from that point of view if you want to get things done. And I care about getting things done in practicalities. And so that's why it is important when you release these that you do this in a very particular way. And I do think that the way it was sort of released was not wasn't done quite right in my view. If you wanted to sort of get everyone on board and sort of play the PR game and get everyone sort of heated up and riled up and want to make a change and kind of unite everyone. Instead, if you support Twitter files, you're like now it's like free speech is associated with the right wing automatically, right? Like I support free
Well, that's
speech.
because the scale was always being pressed down against the right side. So that goes hand in hand with what was happening. So obviously it's going to come off that way, but free speech should be free speech for everybody and not just for one
I
side
mean,
or
these
the
are
other.
media
I completely
organizations that
understand, but
haven't
the way
covered this.
communicated. Yeah, go on.
They haven't covered
So
this
go
at
ahead.
all.
I'll get Prodigal. Yeah,
Yeah,
go
I'm
ahead,
going to say
Prodigal,
that
and then
they
Brian.
haven't covered it at all. In the Barrison
Prodigal, hold on.
lawsuit, it was released that both Axios and CNN, Darby, who's suspended currently, were pressing Twitter to ban Alex Barrison, who was banned. This is the same media who didn't cover anything related to the Hunter Biden laptop story and didn't give a damn until their reporters were suspended for
Who'd you
doxing and
hire? Well,
endangering
obviously, since it's
Elon
a
Musk's
tech
kids'
business, you
real
would hire
time,
tech
then they
people,
cared about free
coders,
speech.
software engineers to keep the place running. Then you'd hire administrative staff because you had to, some lawyers, a caterer, a flack or two, maybe an interior decorator if you wanted HQ to look good. But how many spies would you hire? Well, probably none. Spies have nothing to do with the mission of a social media company. They would not be needed, and you wouldn't hire any opera singers either. Yet, for some reason, Twitter seemed to need an awful lot of spies. The upper ranks of Twitter, we now know, were absolutely loaded with people who once did intel work for government agencies. At least 15 of these people, and possibly many more. Most of them were hired in the wake of Donald Trump's election. Now, what were these people doing all day at what was supposedly a social media company? Well, that's the question, isn't it? We know that James Baker, who came from the FBI, has been accused of secretly censoring incriminating internal files before Elon Musk could release them to the public. Baker was fired for that. So that's some of what James Baker was doing at Twitter. But how about Charles Smith of Twitter's Trust and Safety Department? Smith joined Twitter after working at U.S. Cyber Command. Or how about Jeff Tokadjer, formerly a director of Naval Counterintelligence? What was he doing? Or Kevin Michelina, or Doug Hunt, or Mark Jaruzelski, or Douglas Turner, or Karen Walsh, Russell Handor, Vincent Lucera. All of these people once worked for the FBI as well. Their colleague Jeff Carlton came from the CIA. Patrick Conlon once worked at the NSA, and so on. And it wasn't just American intel officers who found a home at Twitter. The company hired foreign spies, too. In January, Peter Zatko was fired from his position as Twitter's head of security. Reportedly, Zatko lost his job because he complained about the level of control that foreign intelligence agencies had over virtually all of Twitter's operations. According to Zatko, there were operatives on Twitter's payroll from other governments, including China and India, and they had access to private user data. And those are just the details that we know about. Elon Musk was asked recently how many former FBI agents are currently employed by Twitter, but he wouldn't say. It's all pretty weird. Could it be that while the rest of us imagined that Twitter was a social media site, a place to vent about politics and sports and the Kardashians, could it be that Twitter was actually, maybe primarily, a propaganda tool and intelligence gathering apparatus for a variety of intel agencies? Well, yes, that's possible. And you can see why various governments would want access to the information that Twitter had. Keep in mind that Twitter's direct message DM feature functioned for many years as a kind of private text app for some of the world's most prominent people. So if you wanted to know what high government officials really thought, or if you wanted to know what well-informed sources were telling reporters off the record, you would want to see those messages. Did Twitter executives ever share those DMs, those private messages, with anyone outside the company without a warrant? We strongly suspect that they did. The proof, of course, resides on Twitter's servers, along with a lot else. Think about it. If Twitter has been functioning as an arm of government intel agencies, and clearly it has been, then its internal documents will contain information about all kinds of things. Not just about the silencing of Donald Trump. Not just about Tony Fauci's buffoonish lies about the COVID shot. No. Information about big history-shaping events. The sabotage of Nord Stream 2, for example. The supposed poison gas attacks in Syria, both of them. The imprisonment of Julian Assange. Why is he there? The theft of incriminating emails from the DNC. What was that story? The motive behind the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And much, much more. In other words, Elon Musk now has control of the most significant trove of secret information ever to reside in private hands. So far, we have not seen much of it, and you have to wonder why we haven't. Let's hope that we do.
Darby, who's suspended currently, were pressing Twitter to ban Alex Berenson, who was banned. This is the same media who didn't cover anything related to the Hunter Biden laptop story and didn't give a damn until their reporters were suspended for doxing and endangering Elon Musk's kids in real time, and then they cared about free speech. To look at these entities and say that they're good faith actors
but you
at this
kind of
point,
have to play
they're not good
their
faith
game.
actors.
You have to play.
Neither is the FBI.
I agree.
No, and neither are the politicians who are behind Trump getting banned. And that's right and left. That's conservatives and liberals who were totally for Trump and his supporters getting censored and banned because they didn't want the reality of this situation coming out. They didn't want all of this coming out.
Right. The issue is that their priorities were completely askew, and real criminals were getting away with a lot of, bad things, doing a lot of bad things, getting away with it because they were so focused on election misinformation and COVID misinformation and all this other quote unquote misinformation. They were not concerned at all with actual crimes that are happening to actual children in America or anywhere else, really.
Yeah, and as it relates
Correct.
to Twitter, and now we know through the Twitter files that increased staffing requests were made multiple times to tackle this issue, and those requests were denied by Yoel Roth and Vijaya.
That is correct. Yeah,
So,
that is the issue.
I know, Tom, you've been waiting for a while as well.
Well, a few things. First on the FBI employees working there, it depends. It depends what they're doing. I mean, if they were hired to provide security or expertise in terms of dealing with intelligence agencies, they're hired as insurance in that regard. And sometimes it's appropriate, sometimes it looks sketchy. But the mere fact that there are FBI agents there isn't the issue. It's what exactly is Twitter doing in league with the government to protect First Amendment or free speech, or in the case of Twitter specifically, we now know to attack it. And so it's clear that certainly the number one FBI person who was there, who really is more of a political operative than an FBI agent in the traditional sense, was James Baker, who was the top lawyer there, who was at least at one point actually interfering with this process of disclosure that Musk had implemented, hence his firing. The issue of the media and Congress, going back to Congress first, Congress isn't going to do much on this because Republican leadership is typically anti-Trump and doesn't like conservatives and doesn't like the unwashed masses criticizing them online. So a little bit of censorship is not much of a problem to them. And similarly, the left in Congress is happy to have the censorship since they embrace it ideologically and wholeheartedly. And that goes next to the media point. People talk about the hypocrisy of the media. The left isn't hypocritical. They don't believe in free speech for their enemies, and they will fight you to the death for free speech for themselves. And so in the case of Musk, their outrage is they should be able to do whatever they want against their political enemies. And if it means putting their lives in jeopardy through reporting they know is dishonest, is unethical, that should be done. They should be able to do that without consequence. And I don't think any sensible American, left or right, agrees with that in the traditional, in the old-fashioned liberal and conservative sense of the word. But you've had this extremist left approach to free speech that's resulted in legacy media corporations and publications dangerously reporting on the specific location of Elon Musk in a way that they know or should know would place him and his family in jeopardy. Now, as someone who's been regularly censored, suspended, blocked, whatever, from Twitter and other platforms, the one thing I've learned to do is to be extremely cautious in disseminating tweets or links to material that I know has resulted in moderation actions against other accounts. So I may agree with it and be outraged about it, but I was always careful not to push out tweets because I knew they could come after me. And these sophisticated reporters, they should have known that when they were pushing this material out to his specific location, given the rule that is out there and has always been out there, that they were subject to being censored. And of course, their refusal to acknowledge that and admit it and address it directly speaks volumes.
So we do have
We have a couple
privacy,
updates
Ronan.
here from Matt
Jason-
Taibbi. I'm going to read them. Yep. An FBI agent, this is number one, an FBI agent just reached out with a key point about the gross subservience of Twitter before the FBI. Quote, a lot of companies we deal with are adversarial to us. That means they don't work with them. Like T-Mobile is totally adversarial. They love leaking things we're saying if we don't get a process right. 2, I feel like that's the default position. People used to get mad about that in the bureau, in the FBI. But they're supposed to represent their clients and their customers. Why in the hell would you expect them to make it easy on you? Do the right thing, do it the right way. So that's a key point, right? Most companies, when they're working with the FBI, they're doing so very begrudgingly. They don't like working with the FBI. They wait for a warrant or they wait for a subpoena, right? They wait for a court order, someone to tell them, hey, you have to comply with the FBI or else, right? Like that's the law. But in this case, Twitter was working hand in glove with the FBI. That's the big point. That's what Tom is saying, right? They willingly went along with everything the FBI told them to do. And they did so willingly. They offered suggestions. They didn't do it in a way that was protective of their customers. They didn't want to protect the users of Twitter. Their number one priority should be to their customers, right? To their customers, to their investors, whatever. But they're not doing that. They're subservient with the FBI, right? That is next level insane. That it basically makes them an arm of the government. Twitter was acting as an arm of the FBI. That's the point.
Yeah, when you see Twitter saying, oh, yeah, send us preservation letters based on virtually nothing, that's pretty extraordinary. And that's a fair point. But, you can't take away the Trump factor here. This was not like, oh, we've got election issues, we have to work with the FBI on it. They were worried Trump was going to win. And they thought that concerns raised about how the election was being run would elevate the issues he cared about, encourage voters to come out and vote for him, and allow him to win. And these FBI officials, these deep state FBI officials with the anti-Trump activists at Twitter interfered in the election. And in doing so, they were violating the civil rights of American citizens in conspiracy with each other, all to achieve the result they ultimately did achieve, which is ruining the election and compromising the election on behalf of Joe Biden.
That's a lot of conspiracy, though. We don't have facts proving any of that, and that's why I think we need to see.
Well, there was polling done about the Hunter Biden laptop, and if it was actually covered by the media, how much of it would have changed the voting. Some of these polls are anywhere from 30 to 70% it would have voted differently. So let's not lie and say this is something else. And for me, another issue is what people are forgetting, and Tara brings this up, instead of chasing real crime, they're sending generalized requests to ban Americans' free speech. Forget this is the FBI. This is my own money being used against me, taxpayer money, to silence my right to speak. There's a problem with this. If you don't believe there's a problem with this, then you're not objective. They had the deputy general counsel was a former FBI official. Of course, there wasn't going to be no flack. Ignoring 90% plus of the employees donated overwhelmingly to leftist regimes and to leftist causes and cheered on these bans and looked for bans. The FBI and former government officials were in top tier positions, so they would never fight back. They wouldn't care. They worked arm in arm. And if you don't see an issue with this, let me tell you something. When they're done with the right, they're going to turn on you too on the first issue you disagree with. This is a problem for anybody who wants a functioning, honest government. And it's very problematic that people are trying to downplay what occurred. Why is the FBI donating overwhelming resources, expending taxpayer money and hours to silence people and get their tracking info and anybody who's following them? Whether we disagree on the election or not, I can tell you this, I've been along for a long time, and the last time I saw an election take that long was in 2000, but it took 30 days to recount the vote. Not 5 states shutting down simultaneously and then taking 30 days to count the votes a single time. So this was a discussion that should have been had and has never been had. And that's why in 2022, we saw similar issues rear their head in Harris County, in Maricopa County, and in Nevada. You could tell me I'm blind and I'm not seeing this, but everybody's seeing this. And you could pretend, but all you're doing is eliminating your own objectivity, and people will see the bias in your own voice. And I'll stop there.
Brian, do you want to, yeah, all good.
Yeah,
Brian, do you want to respond before we go to Alex?
Yeah, sure. I just think that it's a lot of jumping to conclusions based on incomplete information.
Do they?
Like
Are they owed the benefit of the doubt?
Protocol. Let's have Brian respond.
But we're getting trickles of information from these Twitter files. We're not seeing all the communications between the FBI and Twitter. We're not seeing what exactly the FBI was looking for. Maybe these people were doing more than meets the eye. We don't know that. Could it be that they weren't? Absolutely. Could it be that they were? Absolutely. So I think like jumping to conspiracies and conclusions without having the full information is a little bit irresponsible.
So Brian, just a question for you before we go to Alex. From the information we have so far, would you say there is a bit too much censorship from the FBI? Would that be a fair assumption, a conclusion from your end based on the information we've seen so far?
So I think there's too much censorship from Twitter. Absolutely that. The FBI, I'm not going to say there's too much censorship from the FBI because they're not forcing Twitter to censor. They're pointing out things that they think could be against Twitter's terms of service.
And do you think that, because we've seen things that have been pointed out that are a bit,
yeah,
and do you think this overkill, was it, so what you're saying is overkill not because it's intentional, because it's, I think we had Ian or some other speaker said like the FBI didn't have a lot of intelligent people there. They just weren't good at filtering them. Is that your assumption instead of it being intentional?
I think that some of those jokes that they're saying, hey, you might want to look into that. I think that's ridiculous. Now, is it possible that these people were involved in something more like worse? Is it possible? And the FBI knew something that Twitter didn't, and we don't. That's possible as well. But if that wasn't the case, I think it was a little bit overkill to be saying, "Hey,
has
this
Billy
person
Baldwin
joking
been
around
charged or no?" Because Billy Baldwin was on that list. Has he been charged yet? They sent a preservation letter. They wanted to know who followed Billy Baldwin. To you, that was normal, Brian? Was that something the FBI should be wasting resources on? Actor Billy Baldwin's a domestic terrorist?
Are they going to use the same resources to figure out who is jumping on Elon Musk's hood of the car that his child was in? I mean, that's the thing. And that's the, yeah, and I agree. If they're going to do it for one, then do it for the other, right? So I think that's the biggest issue at hand here. And we're all witnessing it real time. And we've all been a part of it. If you had your account suspended or anything, is that it's very one-sided. If you step out of line and out of, the narrative and don't toe the line, you're going to get shut down, at least in the old Twitter days. Now we're allowed to speak our minds, and now we're allowed to speak up and speak out. But I mean, I think that is where we can all come together and say that's wrong. We should be allowed to speak up. We should be allowed to question things. We should be allowed to question the narrative and not be forced to toe the line. I mean, and Prodigal made a really good point. These are the same people that our tax dollars here in the United States pay. I mean, their paycheck is cut by us, and they're using their abilities to shut us down. The same people who pay their wages. I mean, essentially, it's a complete slap in the face.
Alex, I know you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, just a few things. So, first of all, my takeaway from this drop is the casual nature that the Twitter employees and the FBI had with each other shows that there was regular communication between them, with just saying like Twitter folks, and it was just very casual in tone. Number two, to the point of the concerns with biased nature of these drops and not seeing everything. I think so. Elon had answered my question about that before about are we going to get to see everything? Yeah, he says we're going to get to see everything. I think they're being released in this nature just to outline and to give journalists an opportunity to highlight the key points of the files, because again, if he releases everything, that could be years worth of files to go through, and the actual stories will get lost in the mix. So I think that's why he's doing it this way, but I do believe he will release it in its entirety after. But I believe he's disseminating it to these journalists so that they can highlight the stories. Number three, to the point of FBI agents focusing on this content rather than illegal content and child exploitation. Yet there could be a couple agents just dedicated to election misinformation or concerns they have. The problem I have with this is that they're flagging accounts with no engagement and like 2 followers and 5 followers versus the report that came out with child exploitation content. Content that was on the platform since 2017 that racked up 10 million views. So you're telling me that there was an equal amount
on their social media accounts and then asking a third party to remove them. You know, that's a massive violation of civil rights in a way we haven't seen since the days of World War One.
And Kyle, I appreciate you coming up on stage. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good, man. Good. Thanks for accepting the invite. Would love you to do a quick intro on your background before we ask you some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a indefinitely suspended FBI agent. I worked in the Washington field office for 5 years. I spent part of a year working in New Mexico in Las Cruces under the Albuquerque division. I got 2 years of counterintelligence time and 3 years of essentially counterterrorism time where I worked on a surveillance unit. But I kind of have a number of whistleblowers that I work with, and I've done some theoretically congressionally protected whistleblower activity. And so I've kind of gone into the public space with that since I stopped receiving my paycheck in June. I think the FBI still considers me an employee, although I do not really consider myself an FBI employee.
Okay, and what was the reason that you left the FBI?
Well, I was an objector to their COVID policy, which was put out in the Executive Order 14043, I believe, in September, November of last year. And at this exact same time, I also was given access to this email that came in that said the FBI was tagging parents at school boards under this threat tag called EDU threats, which is essentially a hashtag to identify intelligence that is gained from different investigations or preliminary assessments. And so I kind of came forward with both of those things at the same time. The FBI indefinitely suspended me, theoretically based on a Second Amendment protected activity that I was involved in. I was out shooting in the desert in public land, and they claimed that was unprofessional, which is nonsensical. So I'm kind of an interesting case right now. Like I said, the FBI doesn't know what to do with me, and I kind of don't know what to do with them.
And I've got a few questions because we're making a lot of assumptions here on the FBI. The first question I have is, behind the scenes, are you guys well staffed? How are the resources? Are you guys stretched thin? Because we are making, we're being a bit critical on where those resources are focusing.
Yeah, sure. So, the FBI has the resources to do a lot of the things they want to do, but they also have to make, it's a zero-sum game in a lot of ways. Like there is an opportunity cost when you are going to spend your time doing an investigation into what they're calling mis or disinformation regarding election fraud. Something else is going to have to take a hit. Those resources come from something else. We could have intelligence analysts that are doing analysis of, Chinese documents, of, Russian information coming through, or operations that are being done, or we can be looking into this sort of mis and disinformation on small follower accounts. And I've been talking about this. We've got tools that are in place, things like BabelX, which is a social media exploitation software. They've got things like Data a thing called Zero Fox that was brought up to my attention the other day, which is apparently pretty worthless, but it exists. And so, people are going to have to spend a finite amount of time. They've got somewhere between 8 and 10 hours in a day for the most part. And if they're using them on things that are not crimes and that are, doing what I would say is invasion of the First Amendment protected activities of, people's free speech, the FBI is explicitly forbidden from doing that. And they are also explicitly forbidden from doing that by proxy. They can't walk in and ask a third party to do something that they could not do on their own. And that's where the real flag is for me. I looked at tweet number 26. That's a smoking gun for me. And I've already brought that up to Matt Taibbi. It's like, look, they can't get involved in that at all. And it also harkens back to something that I leaked to Project Veritas and Harmeet Dillon published the other day in late October, where the FBI named 2 election crimes that are not crimes on their election crimes cheat sheet, and that came from the this intelligence group that's out of where is it out of? They're out of headquarters. Their headquarters unit, the Public Corruption Intelligence Unit. They put this cheat sheet out saying mis and disinformation are crimes, and they're not. And I think that's really important to note.
By the way, for the panelists, anyone that has questions for Kyle, just feel free to put your hand up.
I have one.
So Kyle,
Really quick.
Yeah, go ahead, Tara.
I just want to know, is child sexual exploitation a crime?
Absolutely. And I think it's being overlooked in a lot of ways. Like my buddy, Stephen Friend, who, I didn't know before any of this stuff happened. But Stephen let me know that in no uncertain terms, every single FBI person, all 36,000 plus employees, could spend every single day working on child trafficking, child sexual exploitation, and we would still have work to do. We wouldn't get it all done. They're the most busy squads at Washington Field Office. When I worked there, they did more arrests than almost anybody. I think they did more arrests than the MS-13 and the gang squads. There was an arrest or a search warrant operation happening weekly. And that is not common for federal investigations. Like, these things generally take, months and sometimes years. And these guys were doing turnaround, guys and girls, I'll say, we're doing turnarounds in days, because it's just, there's tons of work.
Catherine?
Yeah, Kyle, you mentioned that they were going after these smaller accounts for, misinformation or disinformation. What is sort of the justification that they use? What is the threat that the FBI sees that justifies sort of going after these accounts?
I can't defend it, so I don't know. Like, some of the stuff that was tagged, even in like an Intercept article that I was commenting on, I went on Bongino's show maybe a month ago, and Dan Bongino and I were talking about how there's literally a parody account that said, "Send us your weed stores and hoes be mad." We're like in the bio, and there were 56 followers, and they were flagged, by this San Francisco field office. The work that's going on by this ASAC, this GS15, Elvis Chan, I'm really interested to see if Taibbi actually has information showing that his depositions were not entirely honest. I hope they were. I hope that he did his job the way he's supposed to do it, and he just had a misunderstanding of how it went about. But hopefully he didn't perjure himself, because that would be incredibly incriminating. There's a lot of political animus that goes on, at the upper echelons of the FBI, and I've heard it in no confusing terms. It was very, very explicit to me that not only do we have one way of doing things, the FBI way of doing things, but there is a San Francisco way, which is how we deal with big tech companies. And that's not normal. Like, nobody else has a special way of dealing with companies, but it apparently was set up through the San Francisco field office to deal with the tech companies differently than other legal process and other companies that are out there that we deal with for requesting information.
Can you define this San Francisco way, just so we're clear on that? What's the
I don't
San
know
Francisco
exactly
way?
what it involves. It's just a route and a way that they produce legal process. I'm sure that it still probably follows generally the way people that told me, they just said, like, they heard about this and they thought it was strange. I don't get 100% clarity on a lot of this stuff. And some of these things, like, they were talking about FISA, so we weren't going to talk about FISA in an unclassified setting, but it was enough that people brought it up to me. They thought it was concerning. And I've got a couple hundred folks in the FBI, like, on any given day that are in, end-to-end encrypted apps that we discuss these kind of things. We just don't very into the realm of things that would be considered national security because it's dangerous for everybody and it's illegal.
Tom?
Yeah, Kyle, Tom Fitton over at Judicial Watch. I appreciate your public service, which is probably more important now than it was when you were at the FBI, frankly. You know, one thing that Chan noted, the senior FBI agent, special agent in San Francisco, was that these requests that we're seeing now, evidently, didn't come from low-level FBI agents. They had to be approved by FBI headquarters before they were sent over to Twitter. But, you know, that doesn't necessarily excuse the role of these other agents. So you have, let's say, 80 agents involved here and countless others involved in, you know, the current abusive investigations that are going on. You know, and some defenders of the FBI say, well, you know, it's the leadership. Well, you know, I don't know how many regular agents have to be involved in obviously shady abuses of power by the federal government before we might think there's a compromised systemic issue at the agency. What's your view on that? Is the agency redeemable based on your experience there, or do we need to do a rethinking of it in the sense of doling out its powers and responsibilities to maybe to other agencies or new ones?
Yeah, I tend towards the latter on that topic. I know that there are great people that work in the FBI. I'm friends with many of them. There's plenty of them I don't know who do outstanding work. The danger with an agency that looks at itself, you know, everybody here is probably looking at the FBI as a law enforcement entity. And I'm beating this drum that it really considers itself an intelligence agency first. And you don't have to look any further than the Domestic Intelligence and Operations Guide, which tells us that they consider it first. It's the first thing that's listed. FBI is intelligence agency. And so when you have an intelligence agency with a law enforcement capability, you've got a lot of danger. The second thing is that intelligence agencies are not transparent by their nature. That is the opposite of what we see with local law enforcement and state law enforcement. They don't have that same sort of problem. They may have intelligence units, but their job is to share information, you know, to people who are doing enforcement actions. So there's a lot of people that work within the FBI that are either have their head buried in the sand and are not paying attention. I've had conversations, you know, this calendar year in April, people who had never heard of Hunter Biden's laptop or anything that was going on, and they don't want to know. They just want to do the work they're doing. And I don't fault them for that per se, but you're a federal agency that has federal authorities that are across the entire nation. You kind of have a think it's relevant, and that's not common or necessarily you know, across all the personnel in all the different offices. So the real danger is we talk about the quote unquote good men and women of the FBI. There are some, you know, the rank and file. There's a lot of people that got to go along to get along, and I'm not saying that they knew what they were doing at the time necessarily, but there's, you know, obvious constitutional issues at play right here. And there's no way that you can say that censorship or getting involved in First Amendment protected activities or the analysts that are writing, you know, documents. You know, one of the things that my group, you know, put forward was this militia violent extremist symbols guide, which showed the Betsy Ross flag, and it showed the Gadsden flag and the 1835, you know, Gonzales battle flag. And it says right on the front, you know, like, you know, these symbols do not necessarily indicate that they're a problem because they could be First Amendment protected, but here's a bunch of problems we have. Like, a caveat doesn't cover it when you have the authorities and the powers that the FBI has. So I'd be keen to a bunch of different ideas. I'm actually doing kind of a small podcast where we're interviewing former FBI agents, people who are retired or people who have left the agency and discussed. And I want to know what they think because they all have solution ideas. These are the people that need to be at the table deciding. But as it is, the FBI's brand is very tarnished. It is tarnished to the point of being broken. You know, 50% of this country is not going to open the door and talk to them and considers them an enemy because the FBI has named them as enemies themselves. So that's really dangerous stuff.
Malcolm? Steve? Malcolm, I don't know. You need to unmute. Go ahead, Steve.
Sure. Kyle, thanks for joining us. Very fascinating stuff here. So from your experiences, what do you think and what are your instincts telling you predominantly dictates the culture of what seems to be more and more of ridiculous prioritization of what we're seeing here, of what the FBI prioritizes its energy and time?
And why? And I'll land onto that, Kai. Like, what if this is the case? And it seems like it is, too much attention was prioritized on things that it shouldn't have. What's the reason behind it?
So I've got speculation. I don't have hard facts to back this up. This is my instinct. So you're asking for that. I'll give it to you.
Yep.
It's my belief that the FBI continues to hire less law enforcement and military background people who understand what that oath of office kind of involves and what an unlawful order might look like. And at the same time, they're hiring people with higher, college degrees and more, post bachelor type education. We have a lot of masters and a lot of PhD level people that are working in the analytical end. When you consider, and this is a post 9/11 phenomenon, this is a Director Mueller and on sort of thing. When you consider that intelligence is just information, and the only reason that it's of any value is if you have somebody that can analyze it, then you start hiring a lot of analytical types. And my understanding is this happened over at the CIA as well. People have told me that. That was the instinct they had. So you take all these analytical types, like I said, most of them with advanced degrees, most of them with a lot more sort of schooling. There is a left-wing bias that comes with a lot of those people based on their life experience of being in collegiate, environments where they are in fact just in college classes and they're getting a lot of indoctrination at the same time as information. And when you bring those types of people,
that still smell like the people that were wearing them, and there's thousands of them in there. It changes your perspective on the entire world. It's looking through the lens of how did this atrocity take place, and the only way it takes place is minor government officials are on board, and local law enforcement, state law enforcement, federal law FBI agent has to go to the Holocaust Museum for a full day when we're in the academy. And they have a special program. I don't know if you've ever been to it, but it's well worth your time. If you're a law enforcement officer, you should definitely go. Everybody that's honest that goes through that museum and looks at all the shoes that still smell like the people that were wearing them, and there's thousands of them in there. It changes your perspective on the entire world. It's looking through the lens of how did this atrocity take place, and the only way it takes place is minor government officials are on board, and local law enforcement, state law enforcement, federal law enforcement. And that's when I saw things. Because if anybody refuses to get with the program, it doesn't happen. And the answer, I'm just following orders, it doesn't fly. We know better. Like, that's the whole point of history. We're supposed to be able to see that. That's why every agent has to go to that day. We're supposed to know that if they ask you to do something that's illegal, immoral, or unethical, following orders is not an excuse. It's not an excuse for me. You can't tell me to go get a vaccine that I'm not going to go get. If it goes against my moral principles, I'm not doing it. And I don't want my children to grow up in a world where that's the barrel they're looking down.
That's a really weird thing to spend FBI resources that, if you're doing that, you're not doing gang enforcement. You're not doing the stop of fentanyl coming off the southern border. There's unlimited amounts of cases for trafficking. There's unlimited amounts of cases for federal gang interactions in RICO. There's unlimited amounts of federal fraud, which is a really, really difficult work to do. And if you're going to be hiring people that have lawyers and that are CPAs, like, that's where they should be focusing their time. And a lot of times they end up in, a Chinese counterintelligence squad like I did. And it's like, what the heck are we doing with these people? The FBI doesn't allocate its resources very well, and they certainly don't care what your previous background is when they assign you to a squad. They just assign you because everybody is as good as any other body. And people don't realize that. Like, that's, my background was as a medic in the military, and I had like very direct action type understanding how to do things. I would be great on a squad that did criminal warrants. My first thing was about Twitter being intercepted from day one.
Okay, the third out of the 4 points, as a former XXX official, I can say without a shadow of a doubt, there are still former intelligence agents that work for these companies. He's referring to the social media companies. They don't
100%.
actively report play-by-plays to their former agencies, but the relationships they have are always leveraged. As you can see with my whistleblowing event, some issues get reported more than others. So you said 100% on that one?
Yeah, 100%. They're absolutely. So I've kind of called it, and I guess somebody came up with this in 2014 because it shows up in internet searches, but there's an information industrial complex. There's no question about that. And in the same way that former military members were feeding into that, that military industrial complex, whether it was Raytheon or General Electric or any of the type of defense contractors. And part of it is because their experience is valuable, right? They have a knowledge set that is of use. The other piece is that they have a connection set that's of use. And so there's no question that the intelligence agencies, and there's a number of them, all the IC, definitely feeds people into big tech and into some other places that are going to be sort of analogous to that, whether it be your Verizons or your T-Mobiles and stuff like that. They're hiring these people because they have a skill sets of value of handling information and knowing what to do with it and policing it and so on. So yes, absolutely.
And the last point is, as a pretty big point, but There is no expectation of privacy on social media platforms. That's a pretty extreme take on everything.
That's 100% accurate, though. So it's
Yeah, it's
easily
100% true
searchable.
because Edward Snowden, I mean, he pretty much disclosed what was going on. Anyway, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, you can sit there and I mean, like as an agent, if you have a target, you can go and use it. If there's a tool, and there are tools, like I said, the FBI pays millions of dollars for social acronym for it. It's SOMEX, and there's people all over the the field and at headquarters that do this. So whether it's broad or narrow, and the question of how broad and how narrow is where the constitutionality comes in.
This is something we never want to lose. This is exactly what we all have been fighting for, to be able to do what we are doing right here, right now. So I just want to commend you all and thank you all for your bravery and speaking up and using your voices to come here and share pertinent information with us.
Hey, and I don't want to cut off either, but thank you for that comment. But Kyle hit the nail on the head with the only being the tip of the iceberg of what is available. Twitter's a gift. Elon Musk gave a gift. He's saying, hey, listen, I'm going to show you this stuff. The truth is, the hard work's going to have to happen after this, because Twitter, it doesn't matter if you write it up left-leaning or right-leaning. The job is going to be for people to take a close look at what's being put out and then send out FOIA requests. Journalists have to look at what corporate structures are being used to facilitate the action that's occurring. Because what you're seeing from Twitter is basically the tool. You're not seeing the user. So to get at that, it's going to take a lot of work. And I'll leave it at that, and I'll jump out here and say, from our perspective, we're focused mostly on COVID-related issues for federal government employees, but we feel that's important for every American out there, everybody across the globe. So I'll step out.
Thanks
So,
for sharing that.
Mario, if you're
Appreciate it,
talking,
bro.
please forgive me
Malcolm,
because
go
I
ahead, man.
cannot hear, for some odd reason, I can't hear you. But I did also have to ask Kyle, was it, just two questions. First off, given what we know about the information sharing and the commingling between the intelligence agencies and Twitter and how they were basically acting as a subsidiary, I saw that where Twitter had a rudimentary AI, I don't think Elon would classify it as anything sophisticated, but it still fell under the parameters or guidance of an AI. And so with the FBI working so closely, this AI had terms which are intentionally used to catch up right-wing or right-leaning trends in people and suppress them. So would the FBI have had access to that tool and use those keywords, search phrases, or queries, which are continuously expanding? And would they have actioned or used those in their pursuit of accounts? And also just another follow-up question to that. In regards to, say, the
Mario, those backbeats
access
coming from the mic.
to, let's say, positions.
So I'll let you answer the question, Kyle, while I fix. Malcolm, I'm going to bring you back up so then your mic is fixed and you can hear me. Do you want to answer the first point, Kyle, regarding the access the FBI had to the AI tools at Twitter?
Yeah, I can't speak to that individually or specifically. I wasn't part of a team that would have done that. That would have been most likely a headquarters group. It sounds like that there was a lot of interplay between them. The FBI has their own tools, and like I'd mentioned, a couple of them. Zero Fox is one of them. It's apparently AI driven. I don't know how primitive it is because people tell me it's not super effective, but it does exist. They've got tools like BabelX, which are going to be kind of a combination thereof. And then and Data Miner was another one of these things. Miner with its it ends in MR, it misses some letter. I guess that's a cleverness that people use. But there are AI tools that the Bureau can utilize. What is really strange for me when I look at it, and I brought this up to Taibbi as well, is that a lot of companies are loath to work with law enforcement because, one, it's a pain, and two, they feel it's like a betrayal of their customer base or their user base. And so, and the one I brought up to him I knew specifically was T-Mobile is very happy to disclose legal process that's served to them unless we keep it under wraps on a regular basis. Like every 90 days, we have to update it and tell them that we want to continue this, this kind of gag order on what we've asked for. And if we fall behind on our paperwork, like they go and tell the user, hey, the FBI asked for all your stuff, whatever that thing may be. And I actually think that's really good. Like I'm a father and a husband first, and I'm a citizen second, like kind of the top two. An FBI agent was a distant third. It was a job. It's a job that I loved. but we really need to consider ourselves like, what is the America that you're going to live in? And do you really want corporations bending over backwards to accommodate the federal government when they can just as easily tell them, hey, go get a court order? And I've never found that to be a very frustrating thing. Like, we're supposed to do things in the right way. That's what you should expect from your federal law enforcement. Very dangerous to think that they would, positively collude with them and positively sort of bend over backwards to give it. And so that master/canine relationship that Taibbi was mentioning, one, it looks like that's true. Two, is really troubling to me. And it's not the first time I heard that. Like, there's been meetings with Reddit and some of the other groups that have a lot of people's public information, and it's not publicly, it's publicly available. They have no expectation of privacy, but the FBI cannot be enforcing terms of service for a private company. That's craziness. And it appears that they were.
Tom?
It's important, let me be blunt. The FBI can't be redeemed. It is structurally inconsistent, that they consider themselves above the law in how they manage the powers entrusted to them by the American people. Similarly, the Justice Department can't be trusted as well. And so, that's the challenge we have. And for any whistleblower, Judicial Watch has been representing whistleblowers for decades, including folks from the FBI. Yeah, let me be, and I'm sure this comports with Kyle's experience. If whistleblower A came to Judicial Watch from an agency, of course I'm no lawyer, but I've got a little practical experience in how this goes. The decision a whistleblower has to make is, do I keep on working in the agency or do I leave? Because once they decide to do the right thing, they're out. Their career is destroyed. It's made impossible for them to continue to work there. So everyone who's there has made a compromise. I don't suggest it's an immoral compromise, but a compromise to continue working at an agency that they know is morally deficient and constitutionally at odds with the American people. So that's the challenge we have. And we're seeing evidence of this in the FBI's files here. This is petty, juvenile work by agents who are happy to be. Can you think of an easier job than to be looking at people's tweets and tattling on them to Twitter? Talk about a loser approach. And and I'll just end with this. One of my favorite FBI guys, former FBI guys, used to tell me and this is probably something everyone's heard some fashion or another, is that you've got big cases, big problems. Small cases, small problems. No cases, no problems. And in the case of this election misinformation, there wasn't a big case. It was a small case. And it was actually no case, practically speaking, since they were just making it up as they went along. What a indictment of the FBI these files are.
I'll go, Kyle. As you respond, Kyle, and then I'll give it to Brian. Kyle, as you respond, I'd love you to also tell us once you respond. I want you to focus on the positives of the FBI as well, because I know there's a lot of great points to be critical about, but I want to try to get it balanced out as well on the work they're doing and what they're doing to improve on those, if anything, really, on those concerns that we're voicing.
Well, what I wanted to it's a point correction. It's semantics, but I think it's relevant. When we use a lot of people are using the term FBI agents. There's only 13,600, under 14,000 FBI agents of the 36,000 employees. So the majority of FBI employees, and I'll use that word very specifically, are not agents. Most of them are analytical personnel or professional support. And a lot of the work that you're seeing, these back and forths, do not have to take place between agents and and these companies, and specifically Twitter in this case. It can be analytical types, which is going to be your intelligence analysts. It's going to be our squad operations specialist, which is an intel position. There are people called MAPAs, which is a management and program analyst. So all of these people may be touching data and forwarding things along. And analysts do a lot of the work, and they're doing a lot of kind of the legwork when it comes to these contacts. And I also find them to be more left leaning. That's just a general piece of being, I think, educated at the level that a lot of them are. So that's just worth noting as a semantic point. The second thing is there's tons of great work going on. You're never going to hear about it because it's not inflammatory, but that doesn't mean that the FBI can be saved. And I think those two things can be true at once. The FBI can currently, right now, today, be doing very good work by really good people. They're stopping, threats. That some of them are quietly interrupting terrorism, although I think they're more likely like creating terrorism. That's kind of an FBI move, and it's something that I've been quoted by saying is like the demand for it right now, it outstrips the supply. So we're happy to do these sort of setup jobs.
Sorry, can you demand for what exactly?
Well, the demand for domestic terrorism, I believe, outstrips the supply. I've talked to Trevor Aronson, and we probably don't agree on a lot of things politically, but he and I both understand that what the FBI was doing in the international terrorism space, which was these kind of put up jobs and low IQ, low information types that were getting offered all these, terrible opportunities to commit a crime that they thought was a good idea. We're doing that to domestic terrorists as well. Like, we're happy to fund it. My general rule, and this is funny, you could just put this out to everybody. We got 14,000 people listening. If somebody meets you and you've never met them before, and they want to co-sign or agree with all of your worst ideas, like whatever your terrible ideas are, and they agree with them, and not only that, but they have the money and the ability to help you make it happen for like exactly as much money as you have. Like, you want a suppressed Glock 19 handgun, and you got $618 in the bank, and they want $600. Like, that's not how much it costs. So like, that's what the FBI does. We do these put up jobs where we're willing to, enable people who would never otherwise have the ability to execute a plan. And then of course they never did, because the FBI stops them right away. So that's,
what
that's
we call
the
these people? We call them glowies.
Yes.
People do that at glowies.
Yes.
They're
Here's a
trying to
glow.
set you up. Yep. And they fed post too. What they're doing is fed posting. They put a piece of bait out there, you have some girl, and she's gonna say all the nice things that all these trad males, these incels, want to hear. They want to hear a woman say that, oh yeah, women belong in the kitchen. So guess what? She's gonna echo every single thing that they, every little dumb point that they make, and then put them up to some bullshit, and then arrest them like 2 months later. Fun.
I would say that it's unlikely that FBI agents are doing that, or doing what we'd call online undercovers. That's not really a move that would make a lot of sense. But getting sources signed up that do things, because not all source work is going to be explicitly managed, is a real possibility. And we probably agree on some of the things here. One of my favorite memes is a picture of two guys in suits. They're both wearing cartoon masks. One of them is a guy, and one of them is like a I don't know, emo girl. And it's like somewhere on the internet right now, an FBI agent is trying to convince a CIA agent to do a terrorism, and it's like, OMG, do a terrorism, and it makes me crack up. Like, that's totally plausible. I don't know that it's actually happening, but the idea, that the thought experiment that we are constantly doing this thing and kind of trolling the internet to find it tells us, one, how safe a country we live in, which is incredibly safe for the number of people we have, and then also, we've lost the focus on international terrorism in such ways, because we started looking at, I think the mission creep happened, that we were looking at the Al-Qaeda, we were looking at the the ISIS types and the Al-Shabaabs or whatever else, Islamic terrorism, and then we started looking at homegrown violent extremists. For those of you that follow that kind of thing, like HVE is the gateway. That's the people that are domestically born but foreign inspired. And then once you're looking at domestic terrorism, that is, even if it's foreign inspired, well, you might as well look at all domestic terrorism. And that's kind of where the FBI and DHS and some of these other agencies have gone. That's the danger, because where do you turn that off? Like, they're all looking for a mission. They're all looking to make their
mission
money
creep.
make
Yeah.
sense. Yeah. So
I'll
real.
go quickly. Ian, so first, Ian, I've sent you a DM about a special guest that I'm trying to bring them in. So just check my WhatsApp. In the meantime, I'm going to go to Brian, Malcolm, and then Harrison. And then after that, Kyle, I want to kind of really end it by getting your final thoughts on, what else we can expect from Twitter Files, and how much worse is it? Because you mentioned in one of the things, the other whistleblower mentioned, and you confirmed, is that this is barely the tip of the iceberg. So we'll touch on that at the end. And I see Mr. Gorka also put his hand up, so I'm going to bring up Sebastian. Brian, I know you tried to unmute earlier, so I'll give you the mic when I interrupted you.
Yeah.
Malcolm's been trying to speak for a while as well.
Yeah, so I got Brian, and then right after Malcolm, because I know Malcolm had issues before. Hopefully he can hear me now. Brian, go ahead, and then we'll go Malcolm.
I appreciate everybody's. I think it is a concern that the way Twitter is banning individuals, especially conservatives. But I also want to remind people that the FBI's aren't the bad guys. There's thousands of FBI agents out there protecting this country every day, and whether it's child predators or terrorism or a number of other things, I think that they easily get bad names, and it would be nice to have an FBI agent a non-disgruntled FBI agent on the show and let them weigh in as well. Because I think that over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, the FBI has taken a lot of heat, and those agents who are working tirelessly to protect this country, I don't think they get appreciated enough. So I think it's our responsibility not jump to conspiracy theories, find the facts, listen to the facts, and get all the information before really jumping onto something.
Brian, are you
So,
implying that Kyle is disgruntled? I'm just curious.
I wouldn't say Kyle's disgruntled. I think he left the FBI on terms that I don't think him or the FBI are happy about. So, I mean, I guess you could say that he might have biases like we all have biases.
Kyle, maybe you want to respond quickly to that one before we move on to the next question?
Sure. I mean, I'm probably friends with more FBI agents than any of you all, and I think there are a lot of them are really great. So I have no beef with saying that. I think that's 100% true. And even the people that are great agents. Can you hear me?
Just a minute, Sebastian.
Yeah.
So we'll go. I think, and I tried to balance it out as well. I think, Brian, you made a really good point. I'm glad you did.
True.
Sebastian's just facing technical issues. And I think I tried to balance that out as well, Brian. By the answers, I feel like he's been pretty objective, but it's a valid point to mention. Sorry, Tara, your mic is crazy. All right, so Kyle, I'm going to go to Tara. We can't hear you at all. Your mic is sorry.
Kyle was in the middle of responding.
Oh shit, I can't hear him. Kyle, was he talking and I interrupted?
Sebastian said yes. So go. Can you finish what you were saying, Kyle?
Still can't hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you fix it?
Even FBI agents who are doing good work and are great people. There's no question that they exist. Like I said, I have probably more friends in the FBI than any of you all. The odds are pretty high. And I respect them and I respect what they do. If we got together and have a beer, all we do is talk about what's wrong with the FBI. That's the most common thing that two FBI agents, or if you got 5 together, then you're going to be fighting to get your word in, because everybody knows what's wrong with it internally. And that's not to say that they're not pleased with the things that they're involved in. It's just the greater organization as a kind of an entity. It's unruly, and it's not the individual great work. So you can have two things be true at once. The FBI can be very, very, sort of corrupted and broken in a lot of ways, and still be, just being kept on the right track barely by good people. So that's all I would say.
Malcolm, I know you've been trying to speak for a while.
Yeah, it seems everybody's getting bit by technical bugs.
Yeah, and your mic is a bit. There's a lot of background noise. So I'm not sure if you can make your mic a bit clearer. I tried to say it earlier, but I guess you couldn't hear me.
If you have the best is to unplug your Bluetooth. Also, Mario, when you leave your mic open, there's a lot of backfeed coming from your mic.
Okay. I'll try to fix that now. All right, go ahead, Malcolm.
Take number 2. Can you hear me all right? First off.
No, bro, it's a lot worse.
Oh shit.
So we'll go to Tom, Malcolm, and then you're right after. I promise. As soon as you fix your mic, Tom, I'll let you go, and then we'll go to Malcolm, and then we'll kind of end it with Harrison.
Well, I was going to make some closing remarks. I don't know if you were at that stage yet. So
yeah, maybe I'll give you the final. Yeah, I'll give you the final remarks after Harrison and Malcolm ask their questions.
Okay,
Malcolm, is your mic good?
I'll wait.
Thanks a lot, Tom. Malcolm, how's your mic now?
All right, we're going to give it one more try. I turned the Bluetooth off.
It's good. It's good now, bro. It's good now. It's good.
Man, I'm telling you, we all getting hit by the technical bugs today. First, I gave it to Gorka and whatnot. It's more contagious than COVID. But honestly, I think it's a little unfair what Brian is saying, about disgruntled or non-disgruntled, because in the business world, we have something where it's like, if you really want to get the truest view of a company, get somebody that's on the way out or that's left the company, because they can usually look at it with full perspective and sober eyes. So I like what Kyle says, because he's seen the good, he's seen the bad, but he's not disillusioned, but he's also not looking at it with rose-colored glasses trying to say, oh, this is okay. The FBI is perfect, and I just got to stick with it. So I think Kyle's accounts, number 1, are extremely reliable. Number 2, what I would just like to go ahead and look at is when the FBI is basically prioritizing who to bust, we see every now and again that there were situations where they would, publicize some of the accomplishments that they had. And so my mind goes back to the CSE, the Child Sexual Exploitation Materials. And why on earth if they were in such regular communications with Twitter, and I know, Kyle, you might not have specific knowledge of this, but if they're in direct contact and they like to, go after, say, things that are going to get them some good press, why would they not at least bust one of these minor CSC rings or, distribution operations on Twitter? Because, I think it's bipartisan that we all think child sexual exploitation is bad, or at least I used to think. So why wouldn't they do that if they're communicating regularly and we know that Twitter can see our DMs and Twitter routinely had knowledge of accounts doing this?
So my response to that, first of all, I don't have any special information about what Twitter was doing on their end.
Me, I can't hear.
I think that's really where the question has to be, right? It's what was Twitter's ability? Why were they shielding people if they were? Why was it so successful? It sounds like it's been more successful. I will tell you this: the people in the FBI that work on what we call violent crimes against children, or VCAC, they are among the most passionate and maybe like almost zealots for that type of work, because you can't be part of it and just be, it's not an everyday job for them. It's a passion, it's a drive. These people like put in their heart and soul into it. Everybody I know that's ever worked it, every time you get it, it's about as the most righteous work that you can do in the FBI, but it's not necessarily the most valuable or the most promotable. And so that's a culture problem for the Bureau, I think. Everybody I know that's worked it, and I'm friends with a number of folks. One of my buddies, my Quantico roommate, spent 8 years as an analyst at the Lithicum facility, which does nothing but dark web analysis and trying to hunt these things down. They are wildly passionate about doing it, and that is one of the great things the FBI could do. It should have been the thing that they spent all their time doing, and in my opinion, instead of doing like the January 6th, I'd love to see the 9/11 type exercise executed on child sexual predators, because I'm a father. I got 3 kids under the age of 6 years old, so like those people are evil to me, and I would put everything I have into it. You'd never send me home. But that's not the way the FBI works, and I'd love to know why Twitter didn't do it. That's really the real question for me.
Mario, quick point.
Please do.
So I'm starting to get a little bit pissed off here because, I'm kind of fed up with listening to people like Krasenstein, who've never worked with the FBI, never worked in the FBI. Let's listen to the people like Kyle, who've worked in there, served in the military, had the balls to become a whistleblower, or people like myself who've literally, before I went to the White House, trained thousands of agents, SOSs, and intelligence analysts who actually know the entity of which we are speaking. We're not sitting on the inside reading posts on Axios about this organization. And I want to quote what Kyle said on my radio show last week. There is a phrase inside the FBI. Why is the shield the agents carry so small? Because it is small in comparison to state and local law enforcement. It is a small Leo badge. And Kyle, what is the explanation? What did you say on my show?
I think it's one of those apocryphal stories, but they always said that the badge is so small so that you can't hide behind it.
Right. So listen to what Kyle just said. The badge is so small because you can't hide behind it, because you're the most powerful law enforcement agency, not in America, but in the world. And what have we witnessed in just the last few years? Let's be clear. Why do we have Kyle Seraphin? Why do we have 24 whistleblowers? Because the FBI has become a political arm of one party. The FISA warrants. Do you know James Baker was the FISA guru at the DOJ? He's the guy that signed off on the secret warrants to spy on U.S. citizens because they worked for the Trump campaign. We've got 24 FBI agents with loaded M4 rifles busting down the door of a pro-life preacher as his 7 children are screaming, "Why are you taking my daddy?" on a misdemeanor assault charge that was dismissed out of a local court 4 months previously. We've got the FBI using its tools with big tech to cancel people's accounts because they're what? Conservatives? Not because they're peddling child porn, not because they're working for Al-Shabaab or AQIP, but because they're pro-Trump. Let's be serious. The problem is politicized law enforcement and not a couple of bad apples. I told you the story 3 weeks ago from the Holy Land. 7 weeks in the Trump administration, I've requested 3 FBI agents detailed to me who I had trained previously. And I was told off the record by a senior person, Seb, you're not getting those detailees to the West Wing because the 7th floor of the Hoover building looks at this administration and this president as the enemy. That way lies perdition. When you have, an actress like Gina Carano have the balls to say on Instagram, hey, you know what? The death camps, Auschwitz, didn't start overnight. It began with the dehumanization of the other, of your neighbor. That's what we have in America today. So let's get serious. The big issue, and Kyle can talk to this, is that after 9/11, Bush told Mueller that you are no longer a law enforcement agency. He said it at Camp David. You are now an intelligence agency. That's why the email addresses of every FBI agent ends in what? Kyle, tell them what 2 letters the FBI email system ends with.
Yeah, sure. It's at IC for intelligencecommunity.fbi.gov. They've made it easier, so they reclassify that. But that's the first lesson I got at Quantico. They're like, you're part of the intelligence community now. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, I don't remember signing up to do that. Like, there's something very silly about walking around DC when every single surveillance report, this is just what I saw with my eyes walking around on the street, and I write it down, and suddenly it gets stamped with a secret classification, secret and no foreign. So I used to joke with people and tell people I was a secret agent for the FBI, not a special agent, because everything I wrote said secret on it. And that's kind of crazy. And I didn't do anything that was related to crime. The minute if somebody even alleged that my subjects were involved in a federal crime, somebody else took it. So there's entire swaths of the FBI that are not involved in criminal activity at all, as in investigating criminal activity. They're 100% focused on information for its own sake and for the sake of maybe turning it into a more operational, intelligence gathering. That's not what a lot of people think. And if you don't know that, then now you do. Like, you have to understand that is a fundamental difference. And it happened, like you say,
if the agency becomes an intelligence arm, the temperament is to fall into Leventi Berrier's description, also apocryphal, of the KGB. Show me the man, and I will show you the crime. A law enforcement agency is meant to investigate crimes that have occurred or are about to occur. They're not supposed to collect intelligence about future crimes or potential crimes or crimes my political adversary may commit. And that's what the FBI has sadly become. Sorry, for the record,
you don't
had
know
to be
if
said.
you don't know if they've done that though. You don't know what they were
What
investigating.
the hell are you talking about? Are you shitting me? Are you shitting me? With Mike Flynn. What did they do with?
I want to go quickly, sorry, if you don't mind, Brian and Sebastian, just 2 seconds. So I want to just introduce Congressman Thomas. Congressman, I appreciate you coming on stage.
Okay, is my mic on?
It is. Is that you've been on Spaces before? Or is that your first time?
This will be the first time I've ever spoken on this space.
It's the first time for many, including Sebastian next to you. I'm not sure about Tom as well. So I appreciate you being here.
Well, let me just say, you hear enough hot air from politicians all the time. So I just want to let you know I'm here to listen. And the FBI was created by Congress. The FBI is funded by Congress. If there's any oversight that will happen on the FBI or DOJ, ATF, it will come from the Judiciary Committee. And that's the committee that I'll be serving on for the next 2 years.
Awesome.
So I'm here to listen to you all. I think maybe some of you saw where I put Merrick Garland on the spot and I made him watch a couple minutes of Ray Epps.
I saw it.
This is their worst nightmare, that I will be able to confront them for the next 2 years with the truth, and we will have people from the highest levels in front of our committee, and there is no mute on my microphone for 5 minutes, and they are they're going to be called to answer our questions. So if you all have questions, please engage me on Twitter. I'll be here in your spaces when I can. I found the Twitter files deeply disturbing. I've read them all, every one painfully, sometimes waiting 10 minutes for the next one with the rest of you. And I'll end it there and just say, if you have ideas, please send them to me, and my DMs are open.
I appreciate being here, Congressman. I do have, if you don't mind, ask you one question because I know you said you prefer to be listening,
Absolutely.
but I'd love your take on the files so far. I know you said they're deeply disturbing. We did hear Kyle saying that Kyle and one other whistleblower. So the other whistleblower said that this is barely the tip of the iceberg, and Kyle confirmed that point. Would love your take on it.
Well, I know it's sort of a cliche now on Twitter, but in a closed door meeting, I told the rest of the Judiciary Committee that Elon has bought a crime scene, and they seem to agree with me. And what we need to do, listen, the Twitter files are actually a roadmap for the subpoenas and the requests for information and the interviews that we need to do in Congress. So I really appreciate what Elon and the reporters who are covering this have been able to put out there. But now it's up to the Judiciary Committee to look at where we need to go. They've called in the coordinates now, and we are able to compel the FBI to give us the other side of the story. So I think that's the most important part of the Twitter files.
And are you seeing bipartisan support behind free speech on social media, or is there still resistance, or not people not other senators not giving it enough importance?
Well, let me say I'm friends with Ro Khanna, and I was glad to see him show up in there, and I was glad to see that Elon Musk gave him a good shout out. He and I have tried to intervene on the congressional war powers and also on freedom of speech. And so I think there will be bipartisan opportunities. The reality, though, is that the House of Representatives is kind of mob rule. And when you're in the minority, you are nothing. And when you're in the majority, then you do all the work for the body. So the Democrats are going to get really bipartisan on January 3rd now that we're in the majority.
And one other question I have for you. Go ahead,
Can I just ask a really quick question to Rep. Thomas? I just wanted to let you know that your DMs are actually not open. So unless you follow people, they cannot DM you.
Okay.
But I was going to make a recommendation that maybe you start a thread where people can list questions if it's easier that way under that thread. And then you can kind of see what's brought to the top based on what people like.
Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't know what the term meant. My DMs are open. Do I follow you, Tara?
You do not, so I cannot message you.
Okay.
But I think if you make
I'll fix that right now.
And you can also go into settings and then open up your DMs in settings. I think Tara was trying to say as well. So anyone could DM you.
Yep.
But you'll probably need someone from your team to help you manage the DMs. Another question for you. What got us to this level of influence by the FBI in the various social media platforms, and this level of bias at Twitter and likely on other social media platforms based on what we're seeing so far?
Well, what got us here was complete and total lack of oversight. I mean, until Jim Jordan became the ranking member on Judiciary, basically all the chairman and the ranking member were chosen to toe the establishment line in Washington, D.C. And rather than call out particular Republican chairmen, I'll just say they're pretty much all bad. Just all of the Republican chairmen before Jim Jordan and everyone that served on the Intel committee. And I cannot believe, and I don't mean to say anything bad about him, but why would Trump pick Devin Nunes, the guy who was in charge of all the programs that were used to spy on Trump? Why would he pick him to be the CEO of Truth Social? Like, this is the thing I can't understand. He's the guy who rubber stamped the deep state. So I've just got to say, I'll tie that up by saying that I do believe that Jim Jordan is one of the most honest people in Washington, D.C., and it's their first opportunity to get any real oversight over these organizations that have three letters.
Ian?
Are you really saying, Congressman, that the man who got to the bottom of the Russia hoax is part of the deep state? You're saying that about Devin Nunes? I can't believe you just said that.
Sebastian, he's reauthorized every program that was used to spy on Trump. And we had multiple debates. I've been in Congress for 10 years, multiple debates with that man where he was the guy responsible for making sure all the money flowed to all of the spy programs and all the three-letter organizations.
So who did more to uncover the fake Russia collusion than Devin Nunes? I mean, seriously, the guy who actually uncovered the illegal leaks, the unmaskings. There's nobody else except Devin. I can't believe you said that.
Well, maybe he's done something redeemable. But I was in the skiff with all the folks in the pre-impeachment. Remember, they put I think it was the Intel Committee and our Oversight Committee in the skiff, and I was down there with Jim Jordan, and I think it was Devin Nunes, but the other chairman was so reluctant to do anything that was basically Jim Jordan.
The same Jim Jordan hasn't said anything about the J6 prisoners for 2 years. That Jim Jordan, come on, Brian.
Well, but we had Lieutenant Colonel Vendeman there, and I don't know. I maybe he's done something redeeming. They all do something redeeming every now and then. Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell all do something redeeming, but
even putting Devin in the same sentence as Mitch McConnell and Lindsey's a bad
oh
joke.
gosh,
There's one person who put his balls on the line to uncover Russian collusion, and it was Devin Nunes and Kash Patel. Come on, you know that.
Well, give him credit for that. I'll not take any of that away from him. But he called Justin Amash Al Qaeda's best friend in Congress when Justin Amash tried to do something about the FISA programs, the 215 and the 702.
This is Tom Fitton, Congressman Massey. A question for you on Trump's presentation last, I guess it was yesterday, not the NFTs, which seemed to work out well for him, but the free speech reforms he was suggesting from that he would instill or implement if he were elected again. What struck me about a lot of it, some of which seemed pretty good to me, is that we don't have to wait for him to be in office for something to be done if Congress wanted to get it done. Did you see anything there that Congress should be pursuing in terms of dealing with this? The frustrating thing, whether it be Jim Jordan or anyone else in the Republican Congress, and I know that the exceptions are there always, is the lack of leadership on the Twitter files, on the abuse of Trump, on the suppression of tens of millions of Americans who are concerned about elections. And it seems to me Trump has given a roadmap for Congress, a Republican House, to do something about it in the next year. Did you take a look at that directly? And what's your general thinking about what should be done on this censorship issue from your perspective, which tends to be a bit more iconoclastic than other Republicans, I admit, but you think carefully about it.
Well, I mean, my big disappointment was it, and I advocated for this very heavily in the last few days of the Trump administration, was that Julian Assange wasn't pardoned and Ross Ulbricht's sentence wasn't commuted, and that that those things didn't happen. I did not see Trump's latest thing, so I can't specifically speak to that. But if you had some other question, I'd answer it.
Okay.
So I got a
Well,
question.
he was essentially calling for banning on government from, communicating, censoring Americans.
Amen.
Defunding this disinformation activity that we've been complaining about. It's been exposed. That type of restriction on government activity. One thing we've learned is that the government's got to be censored. That's for sure.
Yeah, and amen. And by the way, Tom, hats off to your organization. You basically are usually in front of the Oversight Committee when I was on the Oversight Committee, because you guys have a path to through the courts to getting those documents through FOIA, and they just stonewall us in the House. We have to be able to cut their funding. That's the only thing that will compel them to come before our committee and to give us the documents that we need. Otherwise, you'll get them quicker than we can get them, but we could get them in 3 hours if we would tell them with a credible threat of cutting their funding. So that's what we've got to do.
You think there's going to be a change in approach in terms of documents for the next Congress? Or is it going to be 2 years of 2 years of complaining about the documents you're not getting?
You'll get them before us, Tom, if we're not willing to cut the funding.
Doesn't
So
augur
Thomas,
well.
I have a question. So, Twitter, or rather Elon Musk, has provided you with a roadmap on how to engage with with the feds, and there's a huge paper trail, right? So you mentioned that you're going to FOIA all these people, and I mean, obviously you can just talk to the FBI and get those files from their end. Uh, do you have any intention of going after companies like Meta and Facebook and all these other companies that have worked with the FBI and the DHS hand in glove, more so than Twitter has, or maybe as much as it has? Do you think this these files help?
Well, listen, Ian, it's great to hear your voice. I've seen your face for
Hey.
6 years and never heard your voice. But it's great to hear from you. Look, the Oversight Committee used to be called OGR, Oversight and Government Reform, and the Democrats changed it to OR Committee, the Oversight and Reform Committee, to imply that we would go after private companies, or that they would go after private companies. It'll be interesting to see when we get in the majority if we change it back to OGR from OR. I am more of, I'm on this side of it. I'm in Congress. I think we should focus on stopping the government from compelling private companies from doing things. If we can get to it from our end instead of trying to compel companies to testify, I'm always uncomfortable when we call these CEOs in and put them on the map when in fact it's the government that's using the force of the gun to get them to do these things. So, yes, but to your specific question, the other companies, yeah, you're right. My gosh, if this is going on at Twitter, it's absolutely going on everywhere else, but it's also being directed from the government to all of those other companies. So I would start with and we can't do FOIAs in Congress. That's what Tom Fitton does. We should have more power. Sadly, if we're not willing to cut their funding, but we should go after all of the communications from FBI, DOJ to Meta, Facebook, Google, whatever. Thank you.
Thanks. That answers my question. Thank you.
Tom? Tom, you've got your hand up?
I don't. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Any other questions, Kyle? Oh yeah, you've had your hand up for a while, Kyle. By the way, just before you ask your Kyle, Thomas, just really appreciate your time on the space. I know you've got limited time. Kyle, the mic is yours. Sorry,
Look,
go ahead.
The first thing they
Thomas.
tell you when you get elected is don't do your own social media, and that's the first rule I ignored. So
I'm glad you ignored it.
Indeed.
Me
Hey,
too.
Congressman, I've got a request, something for you guys to consider on the Judiciary Committee, and I wish you guys would kind of take it to heart and see if it's something you can do. When you bring people like Chris Wray, Director Chris Wray, or you bring in the Attorney General, they have a literal army of people behind them that are willing to go do anything that they ask when it comes to information in real time. And so the answer, I'm not familiar with that situation, which is what is very commonly seen. That's what I see when I watch these hearings. Director Wray will weasel out, and I'll use that word very specifically. He runs away from answering difficult questions and then answers something on the same topic that someone that's maybe more ideologically aligned with him right afterwards. If you can put him to the spot and have him send one of the dozens of minions, they've got a whole group of people standing behind him there that'll go get that information. They can bring it to him in real time, and he can wait. He works for us, the people, and I would love to see him put on the spot and told to go and gather that information right now. Not we'll send you a letter, not we'll look it up and let you know later, not we'll wonder if our lawyers will approve us giving it to you. Like right now, because he can do that and he has the ability to do that. And there are dozens of people in the FBI that would jump at the opportunity to bringing the director exactly what he wants in that moment. So I'd love to see you guys put him to the fire like that and have him do his job in real oversight, if that's possible.
Oh, that's a great idea, and I've wondered what kind of comebacks I could have to those sort of. Well, it's not our policy to provide that. If you go back and watch when I asked Merrick Garland about how many assets or agents of the federal government were present on January 6th, he says it's not our policy to comment on ongoing investigations. And I said, I'm not talking about a specific investigation. So the question is, what do you say when they get to the end of that? I think the next time I'm going to say it, when they say it's our policy not to comment, I'll say it's my policy to introduce articles of impeachment, or it's my policy to cut your funding before you get back to the office.
Right.
If you don't
Well,
answer this question.
And Congressman, with all due respect, too, those policies are developed by who? Because they're developed by the AG and the FBI director. So I have to fly on an FBI jet by policy. That's one decision of his away from no longer being a policy. And it's the same situation about commenting on active investigations. Those policies are, they are at the pleasure of the Attorney General and or the FBI director. They're internal policies. Those are not laws or rules that have to be followed. They can change them with the stroke of a pen. So I would encourage them to make better policies for transparency for the American people, because I want to see it on all ends. Like, I don't want anybody getting away with this kind of cover up.
Oh, and that's a great point. But also the oversight power of Congress is also above all of those policies, and they need to be told that. But when you're in the minority, which we have been for 4 years, you can't really make that stick. When you're in the majority, if Kevin McCarthy and Jim Jordan are willing to make that stick, we can make that stick.
Congressman, do you have time for 2 last questions?
Absolutely.
I appreciate it. Harrison
Wonderful.
and Steve. Steve, you can have the mic first. Ian, do you have more questions as well?
Congressman,
Not at the moment. So Steve can go first.
Steve, perfect.
Thank you, Congressman. Firstly, thank you for spending time with us this evening. And secondly, I want to commend you for making a statement of support for Julian Assange. That's a cause very important to me and many others here. My question is, what is your thoughts on the revision of Section 230 to drastically curtail big tech platforms' power to restrict lawful speech?
Yeah, that's a great question. Section 230, and I'm not passing the buck, I'm just telling you this. Section 230, it turns out, is under the oversight or in the jurisdiction of the Energy and Commerce Committee, not the Judiciary Committee. But we do have jurisdiction over the Bill of Rights, which includes the First Amendment, and also the courts and a lot of other things. So we could claim some jurisdiction there. I'm torn on this. I'm still listening. In the Judiciary Committee, we have the Antitrust Subcommittee. I begged not to be on that. It's complicated law, and I don't like the notion of government going in and telling private businesses what to do. So I'm not on the Antitrust Subcommittee. But I think Section 230 was intended to protect the internet companies, the social media companies, if they allowed free speech, not to protect them when they curtail free speech. And so I had a robust debate about this with some people at Matt Kibbe's Christmas party in Washington, D.C. a couple days ago. He's the former CEO of FreedomWorks, and he's got his own thing, Free the People, but a robust group of free thinkers there. And so, if you have ideas, let me know. I don't have all the answers. That's actually why I was lurking on your space here, was to get some more answers. So you tell me what the answer is, Steve.
I'm not quite sure at this time. I mean, fortunately, hopefully, once you guys retain a majority again, you guys can start really moving forward on getting a kind of a digital free speech Bill of Rights together for us of some sort. One last question, Congressman. Why do you think, in your opinion, we saw so little results from the GOP in regards to protecting citizens' free speech as it relates to big tech when you guys were in power and in charge of both chambers during the first half of Trump's tenure?
Oh, well, it's a complicated question and probably not enough time here to give it. But the chairman of the committees were selected for compliance and for sympathy with the groups that they were supposed to regulate. We have fellows that come over and serve in Congress from FBI, from the military. They serve on the various committees. I think that's backwards. I think we should send some fellows over to the executive branch from the legislative branch to help them out. But you know about this revolving door between K Street and the legislative branch. What maybe not as familiar about is this revolving door between the executive branch and the legislative branch, and they have their tentacles in, and whoever are the chairmen are often selected for compliance and for willingness to perpetuate the programs that are already in place in the executive branch.
Thomas?
A quick question, Congressman Massey. What's your thinking on the speaker's race? What's your thinking? Who should be speaker, and what do you think will happen with the race?
Well, I didn't know the space contained that as part of its agenda. I might not have logged on. Let me give you all a little bit of history.
You can take the fifth.
Well, and let me give you all a little bit of history. I was a part of all three coups to take out John Boehner. The second coup I architected with Jim Bridenstine. We needed 29 votes. We got 24. But Mario Cuomo died in New York, so 10 Democrats went to his funeral, and it meant we needed 34 that day. And we might have succeeded in 2015, January, if not for Mario Cuomo's funeral. Then Mark Meadows and I teamed up. We wrote a motion to vacate, and that was successful. I was adamant that we introduced it the day before August recess so that it would metastasize over August recess. And in fact, it did, and it succeeded. And John Boehner left within a month of the August recess. The saddest day I've ever had in Congress. Well, by the way, after we got John Boehner out of the way, it was going to be that Kevin McCarthy was going to ascend. And I campaigned against him for a few weeks. And the day he was supposed to be confirmed, he stepped out of the race because he didn't have the votes. And so the saddest day of my life in Congress, in the 10 years that I've spent, is when the Freedom Caucus voted for Paul Ryan. All of the work that I put in to trying to disrupt everything, they voted for Paul Ryan. And by the way, they're my best friends on the Freedom Caucus. And a lot of people who are on the Freedom Caucus right now aren't the same people who were there and voted for Paul Ryan. But then when Trump won his election 6-8 weeks after Paul Ryan had thrown him under the bus, I don't know how involved Trump was in this, but Mike Pence came to Congress and told us to vote for Paul Ryan, that Trump wanted Paul Ryan to be the speaker while he was the president. I was the only Republican who would not vote for Paul Ryan in that would have been January 3rd, 2017.
2017,
Go back and look at the tapes. Again, very disappointing to me. So at this point, I am not a part, I gotta tell the media this, I'm not a part of any organized or disorganized effort to keep Kevin McCarthy from becoming speaker, because a lot of the people involved in that effort, now I know a lot of them are earnest, but a lot of them are cutting deals, trying to get better positions on committees, whatever. Not all of them. There are some who are very earnestly intend to get a different speaker. But what I've decided is the biggest mistake people make when they come to Congress is giving their voting card to the speaker. So if you plan to give your voting card to the speaker, that vote on January 3rd is going to be very important. For me, it's not as important. We've got a slim majority, and nobody owns my voting card other than the 750,000 people I represent in Kentucky. So for me, it's not as big of a deal. I do applaud the efforts of those who are pushing back to get rule changes. We do need rule changes to disperse the power in the House. So that's my take on it. Maybe you were hoping for a more clear answer.
We'll go to Harrison for the final question, and then I've got one last comment for you, Congressman. But Harrison, I know you've had your hand up for a while.
Hey, Thomas. It's good to finally talk to you over Spaces. Here's my question. So it always seems like we see members of Congress get up on camera, yell at CEOs or intelligence agency officials. Realistically, what's the best case scenario, and what are the punitive damages that you would like to see done against these groups that have harmed the American people?
Well, okay, there's something I'm circulating in Congress right now, and it's catching on. It's called the Massey Plan. And but let me motivate that before I go into it. The only real leverage we have in a split government is that the House of Representatives is constitutionally originates the spending bills. And so we have to, the only cudgel we have is to cut their spending. And the problem is when you do a giant omnibus, you can't get 218 people who have the spine to stare down a shutdown. And so what I've proposed is to take shutdown off the table, that on the first day that we get the majority, or maybe the second day, let's let all the speaker drama unfold, and whoever becomes speaker, let's say on January 4th, we pass a continuing resolution that funds the government at 95%. Okay, I hate continuing resolutions. I've never voted for one that's become law, but that continuing resolution wouldn't kick in until October 1st. So now we have 9 months to pass 12 separate bills. And this is where our power is, Harrison. We pass 12 separate bills. We fund the roads. We pay the soldiers. We open the national parks. We pay for NASA. And then on September 30th, my weaker colleagues won't be in a position where they either have to vote for a shutdown or vote for a big crap sandwich we call the omnibus. They'll be in a position where we've got a backstop that funds everything at 95%. So on October 1st, CNN, they would have to put a countdown clock that says 24 hours until the government is funded, or until the IRS is funded at 95%. I think my weaker colleagues can weather that storm. And by the way, so I know this is all inside baseball, and I hate that it's so technical, but that's the battle we have. We got to get to the funding. The only way you do the funding is through separate bills, and the only way you can do separate bills is to put this backstop in so that the Republicans don't get blamed for a shutdown.
So, Congressman, I want to end it with a very broad question, and a question I always ask a lot of our panelists. The country is extremely polarized, and it doesn't seem to be improving. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. Is that, and as openly as possible, is that even solvable, or is that just human nature, cognitive bias at its worst? Or is there something systematic that's causing this that we could improve on over the next decade or so?
Well, let me first confirm what you've said. It has gotten more polarized in Congress, I do believe. I've been there 10 years. It's getting harder for me to work across the aisle. For instance, the Democrats refused to co-sponsor any bills of any of the 140 or 50 that voted not to certify the elections. They just outright refused to do it. And all the PAC organizations refused to fund any Republicans who had voted for that. So it has become more polarized. Let me tell you, globally, the big picture for me. I think there are three scenarios. Let's just say they're all equally likely, the outcomes. One is that the most positive outcome is we somehow are able to turn this around in Congress. We get our crap together, and we start tackling the national debt, and we start doing everything that needs to be done to keep our country solvent. That I give that, let's just randomly assign a 1/3 probability to that. The other 1/3 probability is that everything goes to hell in a handbasket. All this money we've printed catches up with us. It collapses quicker than the Fed can raise or lower interest rates on any given month, and the people rioting in the streets. And then I actually prefer that second scenario. Let's give that a 1/3 probability. I actually prefer that to the third scenario. The third scenario is we slowly over time devolve into this socialist communist scenario where, because we devolve so slowly, nobody can remember the way it could have been, and we all live with a lower standard of living, and we go into the idiocracy, if you've seen the movie. And I'm terrified of the third outcome. I prefer the second outcome, which is collapse, where then we can do something about it, to the third outcome. And I'm working for the first outcome, where we try to fix it.
Congressman, really appreciate your time. The team should have sent you my number via DM, so you're welcome to message me anytime you want to come into the space. And if there's ever a space where I think would be good for you to jump in, I'll just send you a message. Otherwise, it's been a pleasure to have you on.
Well, thank you, Mario, for letting me interrupt your space. I will also follow Tara so that she can DM me. My DMs will not be open. I will try to follow all of you who are on there. I think I do follow most of you now. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm just here to listen. And if you see me on this in one of these spaces, don't feel compelled to let me speak. Just let me listen. Thank you very much.
And please,
Absolutely.
Congressman, please come on my national show because I'd like you to back up what you said about Devin.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. We'll just go, Sebastian, just go to C-SPAN and watch our debates over the last 10 years.
No.
And I'm sure he's done some great.
I need you to do it in front of 3 million people, but I'll reach out to your consulate.
I'm sure he's done some very good things there.
Well, I just texted him and he said he always got on with you. He doesn't understand why you just trashed in front of 14,000 people.
No.
So
Ask him if he ever called Justin Amash Al-Qaeda's best friend for simply trying to reform the FISA program.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's a reason to trash him as a member of the deep state, but we'll continue this another time.
Well, he's rubber stamped all of it. Thank you very much.
Mario, are you getting ready to end this space, or are you planning on keeping it going?
No, I'm enjoying this. I'm not.
For the record, can I just say, for the record, as somebody who DM'd me, who's on this call right now, we would know nothing about the Russian collusion hoax and the illegal unmasking if it weren't for Devin Nunes. So Massey is way out of line, and we'll see if he can back it up on my show. But for the record, that was way out of line.
And it would be great to get Mr. Nunes on this space if you're able to get him, Sebastian. I think
I'm
it would make
happy to
for a great
text him
discussion.
now. I'll text him now.
Actually, it would be perfect if he jumps in now. Thomas, Thomas, Congressman, would you agree if Nunes is able to come onto the space? Would you agree to have a discussion here on the space, or is that putting you on the spot too much?
No, I think I would. I'd like to know why he called my friend Justin Amash Al-Qaeda's best friend.
Oh, well, I think will make for a great discussion. Sebastian,
Okay.
if you could get him, that would be great.
I would also, if I could, I would like to invite Justin Amash on the space.
It would be
Absolutely.
great.
Please do. Yeah.
Please
Okay.
do. So the way you could invite him, what's his, Ian, do you want to invite him, send him an invite to the handle?
I can see
I've got his cell number.
Okay, yeah.
He's not in
So now we,
space yet. Yeah, we got to get him up here first.
We might as
we
well
can send
invite
him an
Donald Trump too while we're at it.
What's Ian? What's the handle, Ian? Do you want to read it out to me, and I'll send an invite via DM?
I think Tara might have it.
I can
don't
send him an
think
invite as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can do it.
Perfect. That would be great.
Congressman Massey, if it's okay, if I can ask you a question. We've actually we've met several times. We've worked with.
Nick, you've cut out, I think.
Yes, he has.
Oh yeah, Nick, your mic. Yeah, I think you got a call or something. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah. So we've worked with each other several times. So it's a pleasure to be able to talk to you on here as well. I joined a little late, so I may have missed this, but do you believe that Congress is going to take any action on cryptocurrencies? Because I know that's been floated for a while. We know that the Fed hates cryptocurrencies. I mean, is there any sort of do you feel like there's actually going to be a push for that?
I would like to invite my other congressional friend Warren Davidson on here to discuss cryptocurrencies.
Please, by all means.
Thomas, you're gonna get us to do a record space again, beating Elon's spaces we've had. That would be a great discussion.
By the way, I'm talking
Someone
to you
invite
via
him too.
Starlink. I'm on
You're
Starlink.
you're talking to who? Sorry, Thomas.
I'm using Starlink.
Oh, okay. There you go. Sebastian, how'd you go with Nunes?
I'm texting him right now. The only issue I see is as the CEO of Truth Social, he might have issues coming on a Twitter space. But if somebody,
Oh shit, yeah.
I'm going to send
I
him
forgot.
the link, but there may be an issue there.
That'd be interesting.
I think that's the
No,
same
it'd be-
reason
it'd
why
be-
we haven't Donald Trump hasn't come back to Twitter. Is that correct, Seb? Can you comment on that?
All I've heard is that, and I cannot confirm this, that some of the funders for the Trump Media Group may have stipulated some kind of non-compete for a few months. So the idea that, you know, he builds a whole new competitor to Twitter means he can't just jump back on Twitter if his account is unlocked. I recommended on my show that he should just allow his staff to use his Twitter account to obviate the non-compete. We'll see if that happens.
And Sebastian, if you could tell Mr. Nunes, like the benefit of jumping on is he can talk about Truth Social to tens or hundreds of thousands of people that listen to this.
Just send me the link. Text me the link, and I'll send it right to him.
And I would like to be clear. I take great pains in not attacking the character or the motivations of any member of Congress. You can't even go find me denigrating AOC. I just don't do it, with the exception.
Well, you pretty much you threw him under the bus right now. I mean, you just basically said he's a rubber stamp for the IC. That's denigrating somebody who's former chairman of the Intelligence Committee. That it doesn't get much worse than that. I'm sorry, Thomas.
Yep. Well, how many of the programs got defunded while he was the chairman?
Yeah, I don't want to get in a pissing contest with you. We wouldn't know anything about
I'm not
Russian
pissing with
collusion.
you.
No, we wouldn't know anything about Russian collusion or unmasking if it wasn't for him coming over to the White House when we were there, coming into our skiff and finding out what the Obama administration did. I am sorry, that is not hyperbole. We would know nothing without Devin Nunes and Kash Patel. That's just a statement of fact.
I'm very thankful to him for that.
So, by the way, Sebastian, I'm going to send Devin now an invite. So if he checks his DMs, he'll see a DM from me with an invite to the space.
He doesn't use his Twitter account. I'm texting him. I'm texting him on his
if he makes an exception, that'll be pretty historical, and we'll make sure it's there's a return for an ROI for his time here. I think he can see the ROI. Okay, I've just sent him through the invite now. Perfect, it's gone through. Kyle, what are your thoughts? Kyle and Tom, what are your thoughts on the discussion so far?
You know, first of all, a lot of folks probably don't understand the complicated nature of the way the House operates and the insight on the leadership fight and the Speaker of the House that Congressman Massey gave us. And so, you know, there's internal politics in the Republican Party that, you know, are easily characterized or you know, or belittled, you know, by both, you know, conservatives and liberals. And you know, it's always more complicated. And in terms of the way the congressional committees operate, and I'm sure Massey would agree with me on this, Congressman, it's their chief role is to raise money for the members on the committee. Now, to the degree there's oversight, it's incidental and accidental. I mean, some of the more, you know, some of the committees like Armed Services and such, obviously, you know, they've got significant responsibilities in terms of oversight and sometimes perform them admirably. But typically, you know, members are there to raise money on the committees, and the committees are a vehicle for raising money for members of both parties. And so those members that reject that are almost always at a disadvantage vis-a-vis leadership and are punished as a result. Now, my view on Nunes is that he was not the typical leadership chairman. He was independent-minded. You know, the debate about which authorities should be approved, you know, is something I think that people of good faith can differ on. But there can be no doubt that it was to his professional detriment and over the objections of the leadership of the House that Nunes helped expose the corruption, the worst government corruption scandal in American history, the illicit targeting and abuse of President Trump. And so, you know, whether you support Section 702 or whatever, or the FISA warrant process, you know, to me, it's kind of a different matter. You know, that becomes a policy debate as opposed to this core issue about how a republic is going to function. And Nunes was on the right side of it. You know, one of the reasons is in the private sector, is because he was in the right side of it. So that's my thinking about that debate. And, and also, I talked a little bit about Trump's agenda for reforming free speech. And everyone says, well, Congress isn't going to do anything. Well, they're certainly not going to do anything if they don't hear from people. So I would suggest that you don't have to support Trump. And I don't say this because I support or oppose his candidacy, but look to see what he said about reform, what he wants to do when he comes into office. See if you agree with that, and call your members of the House, 202-224-3121, same number for the Senate, and ask them, why aren't you doing anything on this? And secondly, I would also, this is kind of a conclusion here, Elon Musk his life is on the line. The Biden administration has specifically targeted him. They said his speech is, quote, dangerous. He's been criticized for criticizing a government official. The Federal Trade Commission has targeted his company with harassment. And he's getting zero support from Congress. And I understand why one side of Congress isn't doing it. The lack of Republican support is unbelievable. And my view is, if you support what Elon Musk is doing, and I don't agree with all of his policies, and that's not the issue. The issue is, can someone like him take on and expose government and corporate corruption without being retaliated against in illegal and illicit ways by the government, the media, and his competitors? And what's going to be done to protect him from that retaliation? And if people are concerned about what's happening to Elon Musk, they should be, A, telling their friends and family about what's going on, B, telling their members of Congress what they expect them to do in terms of protecting him and making it an issue. Because if it's not an issue for the voters and people who are calling the offices, otherwise the members are going to avoid the issue as best as they're able for the reasons I discussed earlier.
So,
Thanks.
Congressman, you are a member of the, correct me if I'm wrong, the subcommittee on intellectual property and the internet. Is there anything that you believe that you guys would be able to do now that you are going to gain the majority to protect people like Elon?
I don't know how we would do that within that committee, but if you have suggestions, I'm all ears.
By the way, Congressman, I've invited Congressman Amash. So did he reply to you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll text him right now. I haven't texted.
Oh, good. Yeah, I've just sent him an invite, and I know that Sebastian is messaging Devin, who I've sent an invite to as well. So we'll see if they're free to jump in. That'll be pretty good. So I won't ask you more questions, just to give you more time to message Justin. Kyle, what are your thoughts on the discussion so far? And I know you've given us a lot of insights on the Twitter files. So while Sebastian is inviting Devin and Thomas is inviting Congressman Justin, I would love to get your thoughts on the discussion so far.
Sure. I follow politics because I lived in DC for 5 years, and you don't really have a choice not to. That's the topic of conversations. That's what everybody is about. But I'm an inherently, I'd say, non-political person. I'm kind of a libertarian at heart. I believe in everybody's, freedoms, and I would defend people that I don't agree with. I would defend their ability to say it and talk about it, and I would love to discuss it. And I've had my mind changed on occasion, and I oftentimes do not, because I tend to have pretty good reasons for my beliefs. But I'm not a Republican, and I'm not a Democrat, and so the idea that that people have kind of gotten behind the intelligence community and said that it is supposed to be a weapon for one side or another is really atrocious. That's really the danger that I see. It's something that concerns me very deeply, because these are incredibly powerful tools, and they should be the tools that ensure freedom and the ability to speak and the ability to have all the civil liberties that we have that are guaranteed by our Bill of Rights, but are granted by God and not by our government. They pre-exist government according to the way the founders wrote it. So those kind of things are really important to me. And, I've found myself siding oftentimes with the ACLU when they want to side and say, should Nazis have free speech? Yes, they should. And then we should talk right over them and let them know how foolish they are and that their ideas are ridiculous. And so, it's kind of interesting. We've moved into a political sphere, and we're talking about some things, and I think so often we do, and it's a kind of a tit for tat back and forth between people who have generally when I was growing up, we all kind of agreed on the same 80%, which was that we had the same enemy. It was a Cold War time. We all kind of knew what the troubles were. And the political positions were the arguments about the best way to fix it. They were policy decisions. Now they're moral issues. And it's whether or not you're a good or a bad person. And that's how I think you end up with the death threats that we see to people like Elon Musk, because he's picked a side that really should be an American side, which is that everybody has a chance to speak, that everybody has the ability to stand up and have a position and defend it on its merits. And if it doesn't win out in the marketplace of ideas, then it's roundly defeated. I think that's okay too. But, I'm 100% behind this thing. I wasn't ever on social media. I'm really private. You're not going to go out there and be able to find some tweets of mine from 10 years ago or anything to that effect. And I didn't have a Facebook or, I remember having a MySpace. That was kind of fun. But we're kind of in this world where everybody's going to take this political position. I'd love to get back to just being Americans on the same team. Maybe that's really naive. But at 40 years old, that's my dream for my children, to enter that world. And who knows if it's possible. But, if people like Elon Musk are being threatened, I know a handful of FBI agents that are out of work right now that have some pretty capable skill sets and background in military and law enforcement. And he could certainly snap us up as security guys. I don't think I would let anybody jump on the hood of his child. So, open offer out there if he ends up listening. But moreover, I just want to support that American position, which used to be right down the middle. It's kind of sad where we are.
I was going to ask one more question. I was just messaging a few. We might have a surprise panelist jumping in, so I'll be behind
Mario,
the scenes. But Ian, yeah, go ahead, Congressman.
Justin Amash is at dinner with his family, so he cannot join us.
Okay, it's a good one. So how about this, Congressman? If you're open for it, when Congressman Amash is able to join, we'd love to have you both on stage. Get a special episode for you guys. And we just bring other panelists to ask you questions and get it well organized in advance. Is that something you're open for?
No, absolutely. And he said if this goes on for a while, he might be able to get on later. But he's at dinner with his parents.
How long does he need? Because a lot of people are going crazy in the comments and DMs. They're loving this discussion. So if we can get.
Let's do another one, and let's give Devin Nunes. I did not mean to malign him at all or to downplay his contribution to uncovering the Russian, the fake Russian collusion delusion. I think it is worth noting that he was the chairman and that he reauthorized all the programs that were used for that. And to some degree, you could say that I'm part of the problem, right? Either I've been here 10 years. I'm either part of the problem or have failed to fix it. So I'm open to the same criticism.
Well, there's a lack of seriousness when you're in front of 14,000 people and you're saying, oh, I don't remember. Was it him in the skiff or was it somebody else? I mean, when you're making accusations of that level, it's kind of like either you've got the receipts or you don't have the receipts.
Hey, with all due respect, Sebastian, you've been making acquisitions towards the FBI based on
acquisitions. Do you mean accusations? Acquisitions.
Sorry, I misspoke.
Thomas, so I've just messaged the team. We've sent you my details, Thomas, to Congressman to get that space organized.
Yeah, we'd love to have you on.
Great.
Fantastic.
And I agree. And Sebastian, if Nunes is able to come on, do a one-off space, one-off appearance, it would be. What
right. He said the following to me. Hang on. All right. He said, "I'm not going back on Twitter, but Amash I found to be a very dishonest person. I've sent him in response the link in case his team wants to jump on. So that's where we are right now. As the head of Truth Social, I kind of understand that."
Okay. Does Truth Social have an audio like rooms like this, like spaces?
No, not yet.
No,
not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
No, it's kind of
it seems
bare bones.
Okay. Cool. Well, Sebastian, I appreciate you for trying. Congressman, you've given us a lot of your time. Really grateful. The team sent you my details so we can communicate either on WhatsApp, Telegram, email, or Twitter, whatever you prefer, and we can get that space organized. Otherwise, again, really appreciate giving us all this time.
I appreciate you all for letting me speak. I just came on here to lurk.
Thanks, Thomas. Appreciate you, Congressman. Have a wonderful day. Ian, man, that was an incredible discussion. Tom, Ian, what do you guys think?
I mean,
Can I say something really quick?
Lee, of
you
course,
can
Tara,
talk the
of
whole
course,
time. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
know I
always.
don't get called on, so I kind of have to just butt in when I want to. But I wanted to mention Eliza Blue, who came up. She was removed and dropped back down. But I just want to say a huge shout out to you, Eliza, for all the work you've done, which has been more work than it looks like the FBI has done in stopping the child sexual exploitation that's been running rampant on Twitter. So
I
hats off to
invited
you.
her up
Eliza.
to
Round
speak.
of
I would
applause
love to
to
have
you,
her on.
Eliza.
I'd love to have
Yeah,
her on.
I've invited. So by the way, Tara, I invited Eliza as soon as I saw her for the one reason to discuss with Kyle the concerns because I know she was
Yeah,
very
I
vocal
think
about
that'd
this
be a
issue.
good
Yes,
conversation.
Yeah.
please.
So
That needs to
so so
happen.
yeah. So Eliza, the reason I sent you that invite initially, before you dropped out, is I don't know if you saw that Kyle jumped in earlier, who was talking about. You know, we were asking him a lot of questions, especially Tara, about where the FBI's resources were being allocated. And before I give the mic to Eliza, Kyle, maybe if she hasn't heard it already, and just for the audience, what was your answer to that point regarding how many resources are being allocated to child exploitation? Because you made a few interesting points that will be worth discussing.
Well, so the FBI has a project that's called Innocent Images, and there's an analytical component to it. There's an entire unit that's out of Lithicum, Maryland, that exclusively focuses on violent crimes against children, which is mostly child pornography, and does deep and dark web exploitation and things like that. And I don't want to get too deep into what they do, but there are certainly resources within the Bureau. But when it comes to the actual case agent side, generally speaking, I've never seen more than one on any given field office. So you've got maybe 56 field offices. So a squad, and then one-off cases that are thrown out to the different resident agencies, which are the satellite offices outside of each of the main field offices. So there's a contingent of people. I mean, it's a staple of FBI work. There's no question about that, and it's getting done. But my point would be is that if we assigned every single FBI agent to doing that, including the people that are at headquarters doing management type stuff, there would still be more work to do. And I don't think we would ever run out of it because the depth of evil that exists in this world is it's quite profound. And so, we could spend every waking hour, and the FBI.
Is it glitching for me, Tara, or is it for Kyle?
It's glitching.
Yeah, Kyle, you're back now. You're back now. Eliza, did you hear? I know it glitched at the end. Did you hear the answer?
Yeah, I did hear the answer, and Kyle's completely correct. And I did want to speak about, thank you so much for having me on, by the way. And hello, everybody. My name's Eliza. I'm a survivor
Hey, Eliza.
advocate.
I just want to apologize to you. The other day, I kind of flipped out at you. That was really unbecoming.
It's okay, Ian. I think we squashed it enough, and I appreciate you apologizing.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Eliza. I'm a survivor advocate for those affected by human trafficking, and I'm also a survivor of human trafficking. And Kyle's completely correct with what he just said about the FBI not being able to tackle this issue at scale. It's beyond the pale, the numbers. I also wanted to speak about something else that Kyle said earlier. The protection of Elon Musk right now, we really need to think back and think about what's happening to Julian Assange. We do not want to see a Julian Assange 2.0 happen to Elon Musk. He deserves our protection for what he is willing to fight for right now, which is, just as we were speaking about earlier, our inalienable human rights to have this information, to speak freely. When it comes to the information that was exposed today through the Twitter files, I cannot say that I'm surprised. I'm personally no fan of the FBI that knowingly knew about Jeffrey Epstein for 11 years and did nothing. That's currently being sued by the survivors of Larry Nassar. This is the FBI. This is the FBI that innocent American citizens are forced under a threat of violence to fund. While they are pushing to censor words of innocent American citizens, the words, the thoughts, the ideas, the non-illegal words of innocent American citizens, they are letting child sexual abuse and exploitation material flourish on an American tech platform like Twitter. So I'm really not very happy, as you can see. It's really difficult for me because I see time and time again innocent American citizens being forced to fund this nonsense and this depravity. So if there's any FBI agents in the room that have their heart in the right place, thank you. But please be a hero, quit your job, and become a whistleblower. We need you. The American people need you, and the survivors sexually exploited on Twitter need you. They need you to do the right thing and speak up. And that's honestly about all I have to say. I've really been enjoying listening to the conversation tonight. And I know there's a lot of people in here that have supported me, especially as the hit pieces have been rolling in. I appreciate you. I love you. And I think with that, I'll probably just chill and listen unless you folks have a question for me.
How did the discussion with Elon go? Can you give us like a 2-minute summary?
Which discussion?
Well, wasn't there a Twitter Spaces with you guys a few days ago about child exploitation?
Sure, it was great. It was an honor and a privilege because he had, well, first we had the head of working on child safety, Ella Irwin, speaking in an extremely transparent way. I think one thing that's really important about that conversation is that there were no questions pre-scripted, and I asked ahead of time if there was anything that was off limits, and there was nothing that was off limits. So that went really well with Ella Irwin. So kudos to her. She did an amazing job. I was so impressed. And then of course with Elon, once again, just solidifying his commitment to making the removal of child sexual exploitation the #1 priority. And I think what's amazing about this experience for me is that the proof has been in the pudding. Twitter Safety has put out what they've been working on and the improvements made there. And then Andrea Strappa as well also spoke about the improvements that have been made under Twitter 2.0. So I think it went really well. I'm loving Elon Musk's leadership, especially around this area, because I've been screaming about this issue for years and getting nowhere.
Eliza, thank you for what you do, by the way. I'm just curious, what do you think that the issue was before? Why were they so, why were you stonewalled? You know, people like you. I mean, it seems like based on what we know now, they did absolutely nothing. I mean, they put up a wall and ignored all of the CSE that was on the platform.
Yeah, that's not factual. So Twitter did, by law, have to remove some child sexual abuse material and child sexual exploitation material, and their numbers do speak to that. So that's why I always say at scale when I'm speaking about this issue, because I did, in fact, remove some child sexual abuse material. You know, so that's, they just couldn't, they refused to remove it at scale. As far as why I was stonewalled or other folks like myself out here fighting this specific issue, this is a multifaceted, nuanced answer. I mean, you could see what they were focused on. They were focused on the censorship of words, thoughts, and ideas. Where Twitter really messed up is that they did a cost-benefit analysis, and I can say this with confidence without even knowing for it fully for a fact. Twitter did a cost-benefit analysis on the lives of minor survivors and decided that survivors would not band together and sue. They knew that survivors, these minor survivors from around the globe, would not try to receive justice. And they just thought, you know, that they could skirt by. And, you know, after the John Doe 1 and John Doe 2 case, you would have thought, a smart person would have thought that a sense of urgency and making this a priority would have been something that a platform would have done. But instead, they just didn't make the changes that they needed to. So they could have innovated around this issue at any time. And truthfully, what they really did was put innocent citizens' digital privacy rights on the chopping block and on the line by refusing to address this issue at scale. They left it open for governments and nefarious entities, but specifically more or less governments from around the globe to step in and violate innocent citizens' digital privacy rights, like the Patriot Act 2.0. Is kind of what we were looking at, and what we currently are looking at if the EU and specifically right now Australia gets their way. So it's no joke. This is high stakes game, and I wasn't down to play it. I kept fighting for these minor survivors even when it felt like there was no hope, and I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful that I never stopped.
Kyle, I wanted to go to you, Kyle. Your thoughts on Eliza's concern and why you think not enough was done. I know you talked about the FBI's limited resources, but I think Eliza had some critical points to make about, you know, the real, like, how much did the FBI really care about this problem? And then your thoughts about Twitter's lack of care on such a serious matter. Did you have any thoughts on this, Kyle? Kyle, you're muted. I'll DM Kyle. Tom?
Eliza, Tom Fitton over at Judicial Watch. I can't say I followed the issue as closely as I probably should have because it's just too unpleasant. And I think that's the challenge you have, as you know more than any of us do. I want to highlight what the point you made about protecting Elon Musk. If the left gets his way, in the least, he will be jailed. You have federal officials leaking to the Washington Post or New York Times the other day saying that his free speech reforms will cause violence. And we know what the left's analysis of that is. You must be prosecuted if you say something that causes violence, meaning make political statements that they don't like. So these are not idle issues here. These are real threats, and obviously we're seeing something much more dire with the attack on his family this week that the left is pretending is not important. The left media is pretending is not important as they further and participate in it. But the other issue is, with respect to your issue, it's kind of more of the same, is that we've had this, it shows you the depravity of the big media, that we've had the head of a major corporation admit that the corporation prioritized, as you highlight, censorship to the detriment of protecting minors from sexual exploitation. And, typically that would be an astonishing moment or move. But of course, he's made other admissions as the head of the corporation with respect to election interference and things like that, and the media is ignored. But it shows you how politicized things are, that even when he confirms that kids were abused as a result of the prior misconduct of Twitter management, a major corporation, the media refuses to cover it because they're more interested in suppressing our speech and making it harder for Americans to exercise their free speech rights. And if kids get in the way, so be it. What a nightmare we're in.
These are the same depraved individuals that will cheer on blood-soaked war criminals. Children mean nothing to them. So what are we really talking about here? We've seen time and time again that their human life is of no consequence to them, and children's lives are of no consequence to them. So would it come as a surprise that the corporate media is willing to sweep minor sexually abused victims under the rug? It doesn't come as a surprise to me, but I've known the game. I've seen the game. I've seen it play out a million times. And to make it 10 times worse, the corporate press decided to attack me as a survivor for serving Elon in this way to the best of my ability. It's really, really sick, and it's really depraved, and I think it speaks volumes. I truly do. It was one thing for them to ignore the issue while I was screaming out here for so long. It was one thing, but now for them to flip it and act like nothing's happening, like nothing's changing, is really, really sick. But I expected all this, so I've been prepared for it. And you know what? We do need to, I think you're right. We need to support Elon Musk in this moment. We can't see another Julian Assange in our lifetime. Julian Assange should be free. And all he wanted was to, he wanted to publish things that that the world, that the ruling class might not have wanted us to see, but we deserve to see. We fund the United States government. We fund these governments as innocent citizens of the world. You know what I mean? They work for us. So that's where I think things get twisted. And I refuse to let Elon Musk go down in a burning flames over wanting to give innocent citizens free speech. Sick.
Can I just
You gotta unmute.
hello? Can I just one quick
Yeah.
fact check here? There is one massive difference between Julian Assange and Elon Musk. Okay, can we just remember what Elon Musk's philosophy was for WikiLeaks? His philosophy is there should be nothing classified, ever. That's insanity. And if you want to ask a professional like Kyle Seraphin whether that's a good idea, we shouldn't confuse these two people. Elon Musk have never said that. Okay, the idea that we fund the FBI and the CIA doesn't mean there should be no classified documents in the world. And that's what he built WikiLeaks on. Complete leaking of everything. That way lies insanity. As somebody who worked in the administration, we do overclassify, I'll give you that, but he built his whole philosophy on no classification. And that is, ask Kyle if that's a good idea.
I actually agree with Sebastian on this one.
Well, I didn't say
It's
anything about not. I didn't say anything about issues being declassified. In fact, I specifically asked WikiLeaks, and I specifically asked Twitter 2.0 to retract anything that would put minor survivors or survivors of human trafficking at risk. I've done this multiple times with both WikiLeaks and with Twitter 2.0. So it's not like I'm.
Yes, you have. Yeah.
It's not like I'm saying.
No,
but
Julian
you know
Assange has a philosophy.
Every journalist worth their salt has come out and stood up for Julian Assange. So this is non-negotiable. Everybody knows what's happening to Julian Assange.
I'm not a journalist.
Any journalist or any citizen that believes in a free press and free speech and whistleblower protection and anything of that nature has come out and spoke out about Julian Assange.
Well, I don't care. I don't care, and I don't count myself with those people. The idea that you build a platform that there should be nothing classified and everything should be leaked is anarchy. Anarchy.
Well,
I will say that
if you don't do the crime, then you don't need to have it be exposed.
What are you talking about? So the nuclear launch codes for America should be unclassified? What are you talking about?
I fund these people. As far as I'm concerned, nothing should be a secret to me. That's how I feel. I fund these people.
Well, then there's nothing safe. Then the Russians can corrupt us, and the
Because
Chinese
they would still
can corrupt
have
us.
Foreign countries would still have secrets, and America wouldn't. That's
and
the
we
issue with WikiLeaks. Yeah.
Carl, I know you had your hand up, and I
I'd
was
love to
trying to
weigh
give you
in
the
on
mic
this too.
earlier.
There's a couple
Yeah,
of things
perfect
that have
timing.
been said that I wanted to chat about if it's possible. And Eliza, I'll kind of do it in order. Just real quickly, you mentioned that you have a lot of animosity right now or a lot of distaste for what the FBI has done, and I think that's totally reasonable. There's a dangerous culture and really a nasty culture within the FBI of sexual impropriety, and I don't know if that's what leads to the sort of negative ability to handle child pornography cases and the small push. I've got Steve Friend, who's sitting over in my text messages right now, and his statement was that violent crimes against children, VCAC as we call it, is unpleasant work, so the FBI doesn't force it. It's much easier to have people go after gangs. You can make people go after drugs. You can go after fake terrorism cases. But even the public doesn't really want to know that child pornography and these types of things exist. And so as an FBI agent, it's very easy for you to pop smoke and eject yourself from the VCAC program and that kind of investigation pretty much at any moment. You can self-identify and quit, but you can't do that for January 6th. So that's a real serious priority problem. And as I said, I have this strong feeling because I know of a significant number of executive management people, this is the senior executive service, involved in strong sexual impropriety. I'm not talking about children. I'm just talking about that they are compromised when it comes to their sexual decisions about the people they work with. And that is incredibly dangerous. That is a group of people that are willing to be morally compromised when they have sworn to not do that. And so their ability to look over child pornography as a significant problem or make it the primary focus of the FBI, which we could do, it's within their purview, and they choose not to do it. So I think that your frustration with them is very well placed.
I do want to say something for the record. So even though I have my own thoughts and feelings on the FBI and the United States government, I do abide by the law with everything that I do as far as my advocacy. So I think sometimes that could get a little confusing for folks. I like to clear that up because the FBI is what we have. I do things the right way. I do things above board, legally, lawfully. I do everything the right way. But as a private citizen, I like to speak my mind. I understand why folks don't want to look at this issue. I understand why individuals who work for the FBI wouldn't want to look at this issue. That lets abusers continue to get away with these issues. We can no longer, as a society, continue to look away. That's one of the reasons why I've been so happy with the Elon Musk leadership. He saw the problem, he was told about the problem, and he decided not to look away. And I think that speaks volumes.
Yeah. Hey,
Totally
Eliza,
agree.
I just want to say, thank you for doing what you do. You do the hard work, the work that most of us, right? I'm even speaking for myself here, right? Most of us don't want to do it because it's painful, right? It's hard to do what you do. So thank you. Honestly, truly, thank you.
You don't have to thank me. I love these survivors so much. And if somebody hadn't done it for me, You know, I did a space the other night with the survivors, with the 2 survivors that saved my life. If somebody hadn't come to hell to get me and pick me up from the bottom and love on me when I was unlovable, and I'm sure folks listening right now can tell I'm on fire tonight. Normally I'm bubbly, happy,
Yeah,
in
you
a
are.
good
You're on
mood, but
fire.
I'm mad. I'm really mad. I am mad at the FBI, and I'm not going to mince words about that. You know what I mean? And dust around it. Like, I'm not saying what I'm saying. I want to be very clear. I'm mad right now. But as far as doing it, you know, there are certain times where I can't do it. I got to kind of check out, you know, go touch grass, try to enjoy my life, go hang out with my grandma and do, you know, put on some music, talk to my best friend. But then I got to clock back in because that's what my advocates did for me. So that's what I'm trying to do for other survivors out there, is just not look away and give these abusers any extra time. Abusers don't take a day off. Abusers are working 365 days a year, you know, 24/7. So as far as I'm concerned, I have to work 10 times harder than these abusers. So that's where my mind frame's at.
I appreciate
Kyle,
what
I know
you do.
you
Yeah.
Kyle, I know you were trying to add a few additional points earlier. Before I go to Tom, did you have anything else to add? Ian, Kyle can't hear me. There's the glitch, so let me bring him down. Tell him.
Kyle, if you want to add any additional points, I don't think you can hear Mario.
Oh, I did not. But what I
Yeah.
will say is that I would say that that Seb and Eliza having the disagreement there, they may be just talking right past each other and probably have some agreement and some common ground in between these things. And the reason I say that is there clearly has to be government secrets that are off limits to everybody, even though we all own them. But I do think the default position should be sunlight, should be, you know, the purpose of the Freedom of Information Act was that the people own that information. So I hate that the government's default position is hiding things, and they do it mostly to cover their own asses, which is what we've all seen. But overclassification is a real thing. And at the same time, like, we are not allowed to go after journalists for, you know, there's Supreme Court decisions that have already said, I think it was related to the New York Times in the 70s, that if they publish classified material, then they're covered. So, and I don't think the DOJ should be mincing words about what is and what is not a journalist when somebody is pretty clearly involved in journalism. They've done that with Project Veritas. So, you know, we can all kind of agree on a common ground in this thing, that there need to be some secrets that a lot of people will not be able to see because they can't handle them. There's a lot of people that make terrible choices in this country. And yet, you know, there's also a requirement that we respect our own rule of law and that we actually go by the, you know, the decisions that the courts have made about what that information, once it's public, what can be done with it.
Sebastian, Tom?
Yeah, you know, to echo some of these points, the challenge with Assange is, you know, the laws against the release of classified information. There's no exemption in the media for it. And you know what happened at that time, it was a different day and age than now. But you had a group of folks who had moral objections to the conduct of American foreign policy at this time. You had what was called, you know, that version of it was Bush derangement syndrome. And, you know, rather than principled skepticism using the tools available to you under the law to object to it, they broke the rules and violated very, you know, and put at risk, you know, the material that the folks who have been put at risk aren't necessarily those who have been disclosed as a result of the public disclosures, but the material that foreign governments are likely still sitting on and been able to use to do God knows what else. And so, you know, the Assange story is, I think, Eliza, much more complicated than you're highlighting. It was a case of folks who thought the law didn't apply to them because of the moral nature of their cause. And, you know, that way, anarchy is a nice way of putting it. That way lies the end of the republic. I mean, here we have the efforts to prosecute American citizens and the targeting of American citizens by our federal agencies, not based on the rule of law, but based on politics. And, you know, that is a threat to our republic. And activists deciding to leak classified information, however, you know, right they may be technically that there's too much classified information, is similarly dangerous to the rule of law that fundamentally just protects us all, not just, you know, not just those of us here in Washington, D.C. who are powerful, but as we see with the FBI gang that went after Twitter users, A lot of those folks we don't know. They're small accounts. And, so the abuses that they were really out to get Trump over, that they were willing to do to get Trump, isn't it interesting, the splash damage to everyday citizens in the 2020 election and subsequently? So those are kind of my thoughts. I'm not going to yell at you, Eliza, for, thinking Assange should get out or whatever. But, I think the Justice Department should be treated with significant skepticism. It doesn't mean necessarily all of its targets should be given a pass. Thanks.
I think that the Assange story is so complicated that those on the right and the left both agree and disagree with whether he should be freed or released or whatnot. So I think you're right, Tom.
There's always a possibility that we're talking past each other, but let's be clear here. There's a reason that the classification system exists, and it's not for political purposes. It's to protect Americans. It is abused. It has grown to a bloated state today. But the idea, and he has not recanted on this. To this day, Julian Assange says nobody should have classified information. That's insanity, and that goes to his narcissistic personality. It's like, the levels of analysis you need for Snowden. Okay, Snowden, great whistleblower. A, he's not a whistleblower. He didn't use the whistleblower protections. And B, where did Snowden go with his 28 terabytes of classified information? He didn't go to Switzerland. He didn't go to Vanuatu. He went to China, to communist China, and then to Moscow. Okay, so there's always an extra level of analysis you have to look at. So let's not confuse idealism and political distortion of the national security environment with people who are actually undermining your security and my security and taking terabytes worth of classified data from the NSA to communist China and Vladimir Putin. That's not going to help anyone on this call.
I wanted to kind of end the discussion with a quick question for you, Sebastian, if you don't mind. A completely different point that I wanted to ask. Today, I was pretty surprised to see Trump's NFT collection drop. I don't know if you've looked into it. You had checked it out.
Yeah, no, I opened my show with it yesterday.
What do you think? You think actually, I won't give you my thoughts. Would love to get your thoughts first.
So it dropped as I was opening my radio show yesterday, and at the same time, people missed the 7-minute video that he published that everybody on this call. If you care about the First Amendment, you need to watch the 7-minute video that the president published on what his First Amendment platform would be in a second Trump administration, how he would make it illegal for DHS, for the FBI to coordinate with Palo Alto, with social media on the censorship of Americans. He would make it a very, very serious crime beyond what it already is. So my problem was that this NFT stuff, which is completely Trumpian, and it's a good way to make money. And it turns out that he sold out all the NFTs in 24 hours. Literally, as we were on this call, the front office at Mar-a-Lago sent me a story from Newsmax saying, "Hey, did you know the president sold out all his NFTs?" That's great. But I was incensed. And the second I saw the story, I was furious yesterday. And I contacted Mar-a-Lago and I said, who the hell launched the NFT campaign on the same day as his first substantive policy statement since he announced he's running 5 weeks ago? And I get a response from the comms team saying, oh, it's one of his business partners. Well, I don't care if it's Mother Teresa come back from the dead. The thing that isn't coordinated and you drop it on the same day is one of his most important policy statements since he left the White House. So, again, today I did another monologue, and you guys can, go to my podcast on Spotify or SethGorka.com. It's just 9 minutes long. You can listen to my opening monologue. For those who care about the Republic and who want America First back, those who want to train the deep state, the FBI, DHS, DNI, you've got to have a berserker like President Trump back in the White House, but he needs a team of serious men and women around him. He needs a killer chief of staff, somebody like Kash Patel right now, and he doesn't have it. You know, I've been down to Mar-a-Lago recently. He's got a lot of young people running around him, a lot of pretty people. He doesn't have heavy hitters, and that's going to be a problem. But the good news is we've got 2 years until the election, but he's got to start surrounding himself with serious people who know how to get stuff done. If you know what I mean.
So, regarding the Trump NFTs, I don't know if a lot of people know this or not, but this was actually not anything that was. It was done through a company that licensed Donald Trump's name. It doesn't benefit Donald Trump. I mean, it's not him selling them. It's not the campaign selling. The campaign doesn't benefit at all. It's simply a licensing deal that another company made with Donald Trump and or the Trump organization.
Well, the campaign would definitely benefit. Trump is obviously going to be getting some of that money to use for his campaign. Also, another note,
he didn't
doubled in
license
price
his image
as
for
well
free.
since launching.
He didn't license his image for free. I guarantee you that.
So he's not making a single penny from that. Then why is he doing it? Shouldn't he be
No, I
trying to
said
campaign?
he didn't. I said I guarantee you he didn't license his image for free.
Oh,
I
okay,
guarantee
yes.
you.
Oh no,
Yeah,
no, it
there's
doesn't
no
say
way.
that he did it for free. So I know he's making money on it, but it's just a lot of people. It seems to be like a misunderstanding that a lot of people think that this was either the campaign, especially the campaign, putting this
It's
out.
unrelated
It's
to the
not.
campaign. It's completely unrelated to the campaign. Yeah, it's his own.
Correct.
Like he doesn't even own the NFT business that's doing it. So they're using his likeness and using him to promote a bunch of stuff, right? Along with like the dinners and things like that. But they must have paid him like maybe a couple of $1 million or something, right, for that. So he gets cut in on the deal essentially.
Absolutely.
Personally, it doesn't sit well with me, right? I don't like that, especially like I think that it undermines his campaign overall because it kind of shows a lot of people that he's not serious as a president. Like it gives the impression, right? I don't know if this is true, but like it gives me the impression that, like this should have been something that was done before he announced the campaign. There's something that you do in between presidencies or something. Like right now it just detracts from his actual message, which was that 8-minute video, which is absolutely worth watching. But so many people missed that because it dropped on the same day, and everybody was just talking about the NFTs. It's like, what the hell? It's awful.
By the way, does anyone know where Stella Assange is? She's in London, isn't she? Does anyone know Julian Assange's wife?
Yes.
She's in London, yes?
Yes.
Okay, she's a bit early for her. So I'm going to have her jump in the space. We'll do a special where we bring her in because I think it's definitely a discussion worth having. And
I'm
Harrison,
informed by a pretty knowledgeable NFT guy. He's one of the big ones on OpenSea that there's not a chance he got more than a few $100,000. It seems to him. And
someone
this is a
said
Trump
someone
supporter,
said
by the way.
someone said he got I read somebody got 4 million out of it, or that's not
No,
his cut.
that's not him. That's the 4.5 million is how much they made in total. But even then, it's they may not have made recoup the cost from the mint, right? Like minting NFTs costs money. It's not free, right? You can't just mint something. So, yeah, it may be a matter of him trying to stay hip, and it wasn't good timing. Definitely not. I mean, right now, of course, they made some money off of it, no doubt, but maybe not the best timing. Well, because we know it's not the best timing.
Yeah, it was minted on the Polygon blockchain, and NFTINT was a company behind it. Who knows what they paid him for his likeness? I mean, I think a couple 100,000, maybe 500,000 would be something that would probably be normal. And then of course there's the 10% secondary sale. So anything that resells, who knows if he gets any cut of that or not? We don't know.
Well, I posted
ahead,
a free NFT of me below. Anyone who uses it, send a contribution to Judicial Watch.
Okay, I didn't know whether to laugh or not. I didn't know how to react. I'm like, okay, I didn't know. I didn't want to be out of line and laugh.
Wait, it's both a threat and a joke. Is that how it works?
Is each NFT gonna have your beautiful face in different costumes on it as well?
There
and
you
each one with different superpowers.
In a very tight shirt. That's his thing.
That's right.
And then Sebastian will have his own NFT where you can just travel to get a walk with him for 10 minutes by a lake.
Red tie Sebastian. That's just great stuff.
So guys, I know we went way over time, and we started doing this show on Twitter Live, Spaces glitch, and then Spaces worked, and here we are. I think it was a great discussion. You know, Tom, Sebastian, Congressman Thomas, really enjoyed it. We are gonna have a space most likely tomorrow. We have journalists coming on. It's pinned on my profile. We have journalists coming on to debate the whole Elon Musk suspending a few journalists and the whole free speech debate with the Twitter files as well. So it's going to be tomorrow. And on Sunday, we're trying to get Dr. Fauci, and it's going to take a while, but we have other great doctors coming in on Sunday to debate COVID, because I know that the Fauci files are next in the Twitter files saga. Otherwise, I think that was it. Ian, Tara, Tom, Sebastian, any final words?
Did you get Malone? Did you connect with Malone and McCullough?
I'll check with the team. They just went to bed now. I'm gonna check with the team and let you know. But they probably have, because I know you connected me, so probably have. It's probably in progress to get a time booked. I appreciate the introduction.
I think it would be important for Twitter users and other folks in the positions of influence to demand information from the media companies that help dox Musk. What was their justification for pointing to that real-time personal location data of him and his family? What is their position on that? Is that their policy? And please explain why that should be allowed and sanctioned in what they call journalism. We're in a massive propaganda effort right now to destroy Musk. And it now officially involves harming him and his family in dangerous ways. And if we're concerned about that, anyone listening and my associates and colleagues and friends here should really push back on the media dishonesty here.
I
We've
do
invited.
believe that Collins.
Sorry, go ahead.
I believe Ben Collins was suspended, right, from NBC. Is that correct?
Because of this exact issue?
Yeah.
He was suspended because of his inappropriate commentary and attacks on Musk. That weren't necessarily about this, but because he was a crazed anti-Musk activist. So I guess NBC can censor you for criticizing Musk. That's the only evidence I have of anyone being censored for criticizing Musk. It's NBC News.
Well said. Well said.
And I'm surprised NBC News did that. But one good thing is to see, Mario, your spaces are getting as many views as some cable news shows. So there's definitely a potential future where Twitter Spaces kind of takes away a huge share of mainstream media attention.
I
That'd be
hope
awesome.
so. I hope so. You know,
that would be sick. That would be sick.
Yeah, I mean, look, podcasts get, like Joe Rogan's podcast gets how many million downloads every single time, he puts one out. It's like 5 million minimum. So yeah, spaces are going to be the next big thing, and we're here on the ground floor. And it's thanks to Elon that we're able to do this. And in the future, hopefully there's going to be like an archive of spaces, because right now it's hard to look for spaces, right? You got to set up a website or whatever, maybe a Squarespace thing. But in the future, yeah, I would love to see, there's a lot of stuff that Elon can do for this platform, for content creators like ourselves. So let's look forward to it, and support him all the way, because, man, like, I'm excited. I'm excited for this platform. That's like the first time I felt this way about Twitter, because Twitter for the longest time was just stagnant. Nothing happened with it. It's just dead.
Now there's too much happening. Not keeping up anymore. The night. Yeah, I was just like, in one day you've got from the whole doxing issue to the ban of the accounts, to suddenly a space created with people, the banned accounts being able to join, and then that space crashing after Elon being disrespected on there, and then all of spaces crashing for hours, and then we do it live for the drop, because the drop kicks in, and then afterwards spaces is back. We do a space, we have a congressman jump in, we have a great discussion, and here we are. That's 24 hours on Elon's
guys.
Twitter.
We've had the number one space for the past 6 hours now. So congratulations, everyone. If you participated in this, part of history.
I sincerely believe that Mario, Ian, and Tara, you guys deserve a ton of credit for the growth of spaces in general. So definitely
I'm not good. I'm not good at taking compliments, man. I just don't like it. So I'll go with Tara and Ian. They're killing it. So I want to applaud both of them. And all the other speakers, you know, Tom has been jumping in every space. Sebastian's been jumping in a few of them. Brian's been jumping in a lot of them. Eliza's been doing a lot on spaces. But the cool thing about spaces is how impromptu it is. Like you just, when there's breaking news, like when SBF was arrested or there was that missile to Poland, or whenever there's something breaking.
A hell of a job with his spaces too, you know, like kudos to those guys. They're fantastic.
Agree. And I like kudos to you, Ian, because you wake me up whenever there's breaking news. So
yeah. I don't sleep, right? Yeah, I sleep like 2 hours a day, so I see something happening. I'm like, Mario, get up.
Yeah, I know. I was literally today, no joke, before I ended space, I was just today, I was just talking to my partner, and I'm like, hey, today we're gonna finally sleep early and wake up early. And we're literally, and this is not the first time it happened, like probably the third time in the last few days. And I'm literally about to go to bed at like 1 a.m., which I'm like finally fixing my sleeping pattern. And then Ian's like, Mario, the jobs are there. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, yeah, but Spaces is not working, so we're safe. And I tell my team, yeah, there's the drops, but we can't do Spaces because it's not working for iPhones for most people. And they're like, Mario, just do a Twitter live. We know how to do it. And I'm like, fuck. We do a Twitter live because they found a way to do it. And then I'm like, okay, it should be short because not many people, Twitter live doesn't get that many people. It doesn't get the same reach. So it should be short. We had less people than we usually do, than we have now. And I'm like, we're chill. Halfway through, we're me, Ian, Steve, and Brian, we're covering Ed Krasenstein, and we're covering the drop. And then Spaces works. I'm like, that's it. My day, my sleeping pattern is going to continue being screwed. And here we are. But it's
I don't know how you guys have lives.
Who said we have? You can't speculate like this, Sebastian. Who said I have a life?
Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize.
You're making any assumptions. Yeah, I don't have a life. It's true.
But it's also crazy.
This
Like we. Yeah, it's crazy as well. Like we don't have a business to run. I think I do. I don't know what happened to it. But I like as well how we spend so much time with each other.
I'm really good at time management. Yeah.
Yeah, bro, I don't know.
I'm driving the car and I'm picking up my daughter. My daughter gets in. What are you doing on Spaces?
Oh, wow.
I don't blame her. I don't blame her, Tom. I don't blame her. In a few days, she'll be joining the Spaces and listening. Anyway, guys, I really appreciate it, and hopefully one day we could all meet together, over a drink.
That'd be cool.
And talk about the good old days when we used to have, a few 100,000 listeners per space, and we'll be talking about it when we have 10 million listeners per space. You never know. But otherwise, really appreciate it, guys. I'll see you all tomorrow. For the audience, really appreciate you all. As always, follow all the panelists. They do great spaces themselves. And on my profile, the next space, tomorrow space, is pinned there. It has question marks on what it is, but I'll tell you now, it's going to be a debate between journalists about about censorship, Elon Musk, and recent events, including the Twitter files drop. And we're going to have journalists on both sides of the aisle, so it would be a difficult debate to host, but one worth having. Appreciate you all. Thank you so much, Tom, Tara. Tara, any final words? You're always the best at ending the space. Tara seems off her phone. I think she fell asleep. Love you all. Thank you so much, Tom. Really appreciate it. Brian, Nick. Bye, guys. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tom.
See you, man.
Bye-bye.
See you, man.